Thank you. Hi, hiya. Hey. Listen, Kermit is letting me help plan tonight's show.
That's true, folks. He plans his parts, and I plan the good parts.
Kermit.
I'm just kidding, Fozzie. Go ahead, make your introduction.
Oh, okay. Moving right along, we take you now for a trip into inner space.
I'm very relaxed. I'm terribly calm and tranquil. I'm very, very relaxed indeed. On the outside, but on the inside, I'm like a circle in a spiral, like a wheel within a wheel, a never-ending beginning on a never-spinning reel, just like a snowball down a mountain, or a carnival balloon, or like a carousel that's turning, running rings around the moon, cause like a clock whose hands are sweeping past the minutes of its face. See that the world is like an apple whirling silently in space, just like the circles that you find there in the windmills of your mind, just like a tunnel that you follow to a tunnel of its own, down a hollow to a cavern where the sun is never shown, just like a door that keeps revolving in a half-forgotten dream, or like the ripples from a pebble someone tosses in a stream, cause like a clock whose hands are sweeping past the minutes of its face. See that the world is like an apple whirling silently in space, just like the circles that you find there in the windmills of your mind. Keep it tingle in your pocket, watch it tangle in your head. Why did summer go so quickly? Was it something that you said? See lovers walk along the shore and leave their footprints in the sand, or is the sound of distant drumming just the fingers of your hands? Swinging in the hallway, see the fragment of a song, half-remembered names and faces, but to whom do they belong? Cause when you knew that it was over, you were suddenly aware that the autumn leaves are turning to the color of her hair, just like a circle in a spiral, like a wheel within a wheel, never ending or beginning on a never spinning reel, just such images and wind, just like a circle that you find her in the windmill of your mind. On the outside, I'm very calm.
Well, how'd you like that opening number?
Oh, I didn't notice it.
Didn't notice it? How's that possible? It was loud and raucous with a screaming thing running amok. Oh, how could you not notice it?
Well, in the future, I'll try to be more observant.
Could you do that, please?
All I want to say, they honestly.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating and frankly kind of wild story out of Southeastern Europe. We are going to unpack exactly how a highly localized environmental dispute on the coast of Albania completely morphed into a massive nationwide movement. We're going to break down the facts, the money, the contested land, and most importantly, the incredibly powerful imagery that's driving what is now globally known as the Flamingo Revolution. So let's just start with a really provocative question, because this perfectly captures the visual hook of this entire movement. I mean, think about it. How does a country that is historically known for its incredibly fierce martial symbolism suddenly adopt a bright pink wading bird as the face of its resistance? To really grasp the depth of these protests, we have to understand the specific power of this symbol. You see, protesters have literally taken the ultimate symbol of Albanian national identity and just fundamentally reimagined it for their cause. The traditional flag, you know it well, features that stark black double-headed eagle against a blood-red background. But right now, in the streets of Tirana, there's a totally different flag flying. The eagle, replaced by pink flamingos.
That blood red background completely swapped out for a deep sea blue. It's an absolutely striking visual statement. It signals a totally reimagined national identity, one that's deeply, deeply tied to the sea and the wetland ecosystems that they are fighting so hard to protect.
All right, let's break this down. Layer 1, a protected paradise. To unpack exactly why this flamingo carries so much weight, we need to peel back the first layer and look at the actual environment that's at the center of this fight. What's literally at stake here is the Karaburun Sazan Marine National Park. We are talking about a pristine, legally protected marine park located right where the Adriatic meets the Mediterranean. The Sazan Island itself is actually an abandoned military base, and it's remained pretty much untouched since 1992. Because of that isolation, the original coastal vegetation has just thrived. The surrounding waters are even officially classified as a specially protected area of Mediterranean importance.
So the crucial point here is that the flamingo is not just some quirky graphic design choice. It literally represents the endangered wildlife and the incredibly fragile ecosystems in the Vijoza Narta wetlands and the Sazan coast. These specific wetlands are the critical breeding grounds for these flamingos, and they share this habitat with some pretty amazing globally endangered species like the Mediterranean monk seal, sea turtles, and pelicans. Environmentalists are arguing that the heavy machinery, the noise, and the artificial lighting from any large-scale construction would just permanently drive all of this wildlife away.
Which brings us to Layer 2, the billionaire developers. Let's see exactly who these flamingos are standing in the way of and what they're trying to build.
You really have to notice how rapidly a casual trip evolved into a massive state-backed development initiative. Back in July 2021, Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump visited Sazan Island on a friend's luxury yacht. Fast forward to March 2024, and Kushner officially announces plans for a major luxury resort. By December 2025, the Albanian government grants the Sazan project strategic investment status. Oh, and it's definitely worth noting that shortly before this announcement, the government actually passed an amendment that completely exempts five-star luxury resorts from construction restrictions in environmentally protected areas. Now, Albanian Prime Minister Edi Rama has been heavily championing these developments. He claims that these resort projects are going to bring a staggering 5 billion euros in total value to the country. 5 billion. That is a number that would drastically alter the economic landscape of Albania. The Prime Minister essentially argues that this is an absolute gift for the country's tourism sector, something they simply cannot afford to ignore. But, when you dig into it, this breaks down into a much more complex reality that often gets blurred in the big headlines. We are actually looking at two very different land grabs, driven by totally distinct international billionaires. On Sazan Island, you have Jared Kushner's affinity partners, and they're developing on uninhabited state military land. But then, on the nearby Zvornik's coast, the mainland development is linked to the Qatari Al Khayat brothers. These are the billionaires known for building out the World Cup infrastructure, and that specific land involves deeply contested private titles. Yet incredibly, investigative documents recently revealed that the company holding the development permit for the luxury resort on the Zvornik coast was sold for a mere 306,000 euros, when locals, some of whom actually have contested ownership claims to these exact lands, saw protected public coastline being transferred to international shell companies for such a ridiculously low sum. Well, it fueled massive local outrage. It even sparked a formal investigation by Albania's special anti-corruption structure. And that outrage leads us right into Layer 3, a nonpartisan movement. This is where we explore how a localized dispute over land transformed into a massive civic uprising across the country, and even into the diaspora.
Albania is not for sale. That powerful chant has been echoing through the streets of Tirana, Vlore, and cities all across Europe where the Albanian diaspora has gathered. It just perfectly captures the raw frustration of citizens who are fighting what they view as a total lack of transparency, the destruction of their natural heritage, and frankly, state capture by international billionaires.
And here is exactly where the flamingo steps in as the ultimate unifying icon. First off, it represents environmental protection of the wetlands where they breed. Second, and this is absolutely vital, it represents a completely non-partisan civic identity. These protesters have outright rejected traditional politicians. In fact, they've actively demanded the resignation of both Prime Minister Rama and the opposition leader, Sali Berisha, because both men actually support these resort projects. And third, it represents that reimagined national identity we talked about earlier, citizens demanding a future based on preservation and the rule of law, rather than just concrete and elite backroom deals.
What started out as a pretty localized dispute over public beach access just exploded. Basically, a private development company erected barbed wire across a protected beach in Zvornik, and the locals pushed back.
Things escalated incredibly fast when private security personnel used pepper spray and were actually filmed dragging a protester along the ground while police just stood by and watched. That single spark ignited the capital. Within days, tens of thousands of citizens were marching in Tirana, facing down water cannons and loudly demanding government accountability.
Finally, we reach layer 4, the geopolitical spin. Let's look at how the government is actively attempting to completely reframe the narrative of this grassroots movement on the international stage. We have to impartially look at this dizzying contrast in the narratives being told right now. As the protests grew, Prime Minister Edi Rama went on to claim the movement was actually part of a hybrid war orchestrated by enemies of Albania and Israel. He specifically pointed to fake profiles and bots fueling anti-American and anti-Semitic sentiments, supposedly because of Jared Kushner's involvement. However, investigative realities point in a completely different direction. The money behind the mainland development is largely coming from Qatar, and the opposition to the project is heavily backed by very mainstream European conservation organizations. In fact, 41 mainstream organizations across 28 different countries, including huge groups like BirdLife International and REC Albania, drafted a unified formal plea to stop the construction. And what makes this so fascinating is that these are the exact same conservationists the Prime Minister worked hand in hand with just a year prior to establish the Vjosa Wild River National Park.
The geopolitical spin reached such a surreal level that even the Iranian government ended up getting involved. Esmail Bagah, a spokesperson for the Iranian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, publicly brushed off the Prime Minister's claims of a hybrid war, literally calling it a laughable accusation. They stated it was just a distraction tactic meant to deflect from the very real domestic political demands of the Albanian people themselves. When you strip away the billionaire developers, the shell companies, and the grand sweeping geopolitical narratives about hybrid wars, it really all comes back down to the core visual of this movement. It's ordinary citizens, people holding pink inflatable pool toys and cardboard flamingo cutouts, standing right there in the streets defending their home, their wetlands, and their civic rights against multi-billion-dollar international capital.
As the situation continues to unfold, especially with the EU now stepping in to warn that this project could complicate Albania's entire accession process, I want to leave you with this final, critical question to chew on. Can multi-billion-dollar international luxury tourism ever truly coexist with genuine environmental preservation and local sovereignty? It's a question not just for Albania, but honestly, for the whole world. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep your eyes on the flamingos.
Imagine a multi-billion-dollar stretch of pristine European coastline.
Right. Highly sought-after real estate.
Exactly. Now imagine the company that holds the permits to build a massive luxury resort on it being sold for the price of, like, a modest suburban house.
A house? Wait, really?
Yeah, just 306,000 euros. Welcome to the Albanian coast.
That is just wild.
It really is. So if you were with us last time for the first part of this deep dive, you know the surface story of what's happening there.
Right, the protests, the whole inflatable flamingo thing.
Yeah, the flamingos, and just the sheer volume of political noise surrounding this project. But today, we're taking a completely different angle.
Because we really need to look at the documents, right?
Exactly. We are digging into investigative reports from BRN and the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, OCCRP, plus international humanitarian ledgers and official government statements. Because our mission today is to look right past those loud headlines.
And you really have to, actively tune them out. Because the headlines are designed to be deafening, honestly.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, you look at the news and you see Jared Kushner, Ivanka Trump, these allegations of Iranian bots stoking protests, and these wild online conspiracies about Israeli colonization in the Balkans. It is just an absolute wall of static.
And static is incredibly useful if you want to hide the signal.
Right.
Because when you strip away the social media outrage, it's not the story they tell you that matters. It's what they omit.
So true.
What's missing from all those screaming headlines are the actual names on the deeds. And, a money rail that leads straight out of the United States, right to Doha, Qatar.
Which is a huge shift. But to even begin tracing that Qatari money, we have to fix this major geographical illusion that the media is basically perpetuating right now.
Oh, the parcel thing. Yes.
Right. They cover this development as if it is one massive unified piece of land.
Yeah.
And it absolutely is not.
Not at all.
We are dealing with two distinct parcels with completely different ownership histories, and merging them is how the real buyers are hiding in plain sight.
So let's lay the map out for you. Parcel 1 is Sazan Island.
The military base.
Exactly. This is an uninhabited, former communist military base. Because it's a military site, it is state-granted ground. There are no private owners to displace, no local farmers to evict.
Right, it's clean.
Yeah. And Sazan Island is where Kushner's firm, Affinity Partners, has been officially granted that strategic investor status by the Albanian government.
Right, but then you cross the water over to Parcel 2.
And that's where it gets messy.
Really messy. This is the Zvernek mainland, sitting right on the Vjosa-Narda wetland. This isn't an empty military base at all.
Right.
These are privately owned coastal plots. And if you know anything about post-communist Albania, you know that property titles here are fiercely contested. It's this overlapping nightmare of claims between pre-1945 owners and post-communist occupants.
Just decades of legal battles.
Exactly. And here is the fact that the headlines omit. Kushner didn't buy the Zvernek mainland. The Qataris did.
Wow. Okay, so looking at these corporate registries, Kushner isn't the engine here. He's like the hood ornament.
That's a great way to put it, yeah.
Because the company that actually bought the mainland plots is called Albania Land Development. And sitting at the top of that corporate structure are the Qatari billionaire Al Khayat brothers.
Right. And they are not small players.
Not at all. Their massive conglomerate, Power International Holding, is the exact same machine that built much of the infrastructure for the 2022 World Cup in Doha.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Even Prime Minister Edi Rama has quietly conceded on the record that this project is, quote, backed by Qatari capital.
But the transaction history of Albania land development is where the timeline of events becomes, physically impossible to justify.
The SPAC freeze. Let's get into this because this blew my mind.
Yeah, so on June 2nd, Albania's elite anti-corruption structure, which is called SPAC, they froze this company's accounts.
Right.
They were actively probing allegedly fraudulent property titles connected to these exact mainland plots.
But hold on. If SPAC is this premier anti-corruption unit, why do they just suddenly fold?
Right. It doesn't make sense on paper.
Because according to the documents, this development vehicle, which holds the keys to a project valued in the billions, gets sold from a Dutch shell company to an Al Khayat representative for that 306,000 euros we mentioned.
Yeah, pennies.
And then less than 24 hours after SPAC froze those accounts, they just unfroze them. You don't drop a massive fraud probe overnight just because a new billionaire steps in, right?
Well, you do if you are facing the threat of international arbitration.
Oh, okay. The treaties.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When a massive foreign conglomerate steps into a project, they bring the protection of bilateral investment treaties.
Right, which bypass local courts.
Exactly. These treaties often allow foreign investors to skip the local courts entirely. They can sue national governments in private international tribunals for blocking their investments.
So they can hold a country hostage, basically.
Pretty much. The threat of a multi-billion-dollar arbitration lawsuit that could literally bankrupt the national treasury is usually enough to make a local prosecutor back down overnight.
Man. So it's essentially a geopolitical version of house flipping.
That is exactly what it is.
Like, you can't just hand-contested, potentially stolen land directly to a Qatari billionaire. It's way too dirty.
Right, it looks terrible.
So you have someone else assemble the distressed property, clean up the paperwork, use that threat of arbitration to kill the legal heat, and then you just drop a glossy American celebrity brand on top so it looks respectable to the ultimate buyer.
That is the exact mechanism.
Huh.
The Al Khayats act as the respectable buyers holding the, legally clean mainland plots.
Right.
But to understand how those distressed plots were assembled in the first place, we have to look at the investigative reporting from Byrne.
Yeah.
And we really need to explicitly state for you that these are allegations currently under active probe.
Absolutely. There are no convictions yet, but
Yeah.
the document trail Byrne assembled, it reads like a laundering manual.
It really does.
It starts with a local owner named Manela Baliu, who claims their land was simply not for sale and that locals were forcibly driven off their property.
Which is horrifying.
Yeah, but you can't just evict people and build a massive luxury hotel. You need a washing machine for the deeds.
Enter the offshore Dutch trust. The development vehicle was registered in the Netherlands.
Wait, hold on. The Netherlands is in the EU. They have incredibly strict corporate transparency laws. How does an EU trust hide a land grab?
Because of the 25% loophole.
Oh, right.
Yeah. EU beneficial ownership laws are designed to catch major corporate owners. So if you own 25% or more of a company, you have to be publicly named.
Okay, makes sense.
But if you construct a trust with 5 hidden owners and you give each of them just under 25%, well, the law allows them to remain completely anonymous.
That is such a glaring loophole.
It's massive. It was meant to be a threshold for bureaucracy, just to cut down on paperwork, but it inadvertently created a complete roadmap for syndicates to hide.
And the network surrounding that specific Dutch trust is exactly why they wanted to hide.
Yeah, Buren's reporting here is intense.
According to them, it allegedly includes a businessman accused of ties to the Italian mafia, plus a former judge who literally quit his job rather than face a mandatory state scrutiny of his unexplained wealth.
Which is always a red flag.
Huge red flag. And figures tied directly to a major Albanian oligarch.
So look at the sequence here, right?
Yeah.
Locals are forced off. The titles are laundered through an organized crime-linked network, hiding behind a Dutch offshore trust.
Right.
The Qatari company acquires what now appear to be legally clean plots, brushing off the local prosecutors with the threat of arbitration. The Kushner brand goes on top.
The shiny hood ornament.
Exactly. And finally, the Albanian state passes Law 21/2024, which magically reclassifies the protected coast and fast-tracks the permits.
You know what this reminds me of? You remember what happened in Belgrade last month with the Kushner deal falling apart?
Totally.
Look at the sequence. They're running the exact same playbook here. In Serbia, you had a Kushner-linked luxury complex proposed for a protected site, and then the parliament passed a special law to lift the protection status.
Precisely the same template. But in Serbia, weeks after that law passed, the organized crime prosecutor actually bared their teeth.
Right, they fought back.
Yeah. They charged 4 people, including a government minister, with document fraud. And the moment those charges hit the wire, Kushner withdrew.
So it really makes you wonder, right? Why hasn't Kushner withdrawn in Albania when the exact same fraud probes are circling the exact same playbook?
That's the billion-dollar question.
Because in Albania, he's not the wallet, the Al-Qayyats are. Which forces us to ask the real core question here, why Qatar?
Right.
How does a Gulf nation suddenly become the dominant quiet player controlling the Albanian coast?
Well, to figure that out, you have to leave the real estate registries entirely. You have to open the International Humanitarian Funding Ledger.
Oh, this is where it gets crazy.
Yeah, and this is where we need to establish the geopolitical context for you, because Doha didn't just wake up one morning and decide they loved the Balkans.
Right. The hinge year for all of this is 2017.
Exactly. In 2017, a coalition led by Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates launched a total blockade against Qatar.
They just shut them off.
Completely. They closed their airspace, cut off food imports, and explicitly accused Doha of terror financing.
Wow.
Qatar was suddenly boxed in. They were facing an existential threat. They realized they needed friends outside the Gulf, and they needed to rehabilitate their global image, immediately.
So they pivot.
Yes. Doha executed a massive soft power pivot, and the Balkans were the perfect target. Muslim majority, geographically inside Europe, and very strategically placed.
And then the tragedy of the 2019 Albanian earthquake happened.
Exactly. That disaster opened the door for them to enter at scale under the banner of relief.
And the numbers in the follow the money ledger illustrate this pivot perfectly. Look at Albania's net humanitarian funding in 2011. Qatar contributed 0%.
Right, nothing.
The money was primarily American and European. But by 2021, Qatar accounted for roughly 71% of all humanitarian funding in the country.
It's a staggering takeover. And you really have to pay attention to the United States in that ledger. In 2022, the U.S. was still the second largest donor, putting in about $1.9 million.
Right, a decent chunk. But look at the projections for 2025 and the data we have for 2026. The United States vanishes entirely. $0.
Gone.
Meanwhile, Qatar Charity holds up to 72% of the funding field and is hovering around 50% so far in 2026.
So as Washington withdrew, Doha consolidated its grip.
Yes. Now, as we talk about Qatari money, we need to enforce a strict boundary for you. Western media constantly lumps, Qatar into one big, vague bucket.
And you must never merge the 3 distinct Qatari actors operating here.
This is critical, yeah.
First, you have the Qatari state operating through the Qatar Front for Development. In 2021, they were the dominant donor, routing massive funds directly to, quote, private individuals.
Okay, so that's the state.
Right. Second, you have the NGO, Qatar Charity. And third, you have private capital, which are the Al-Qayyat brothers buying up the commercial land.
But when you look at how that second group, the NGO, Qatar Charity, operates in the ledger, there is a structural anomaly that jumps right off the page.
It's so weird.
In every single entry, Qatar Charity is listed at the identical dollar figure as both the donor and the recipient.
Right. So in a given year, they are listed as donating $5 million and receiving $5 million.
It's a completely closed loop. It is the equivalent of like a contractor paying himself to inspect his own plumbing work and then submitting a clean bill of health to the city.
That's exactly it.
There is no independent intermediary between the wallet and the work. They answer to no one but themselves.
Which is why we have to examine the history of Qatar Charity with complete neutrality, because it operates in these tiers of heavily contested history.
Okay, let's break that down.
In the 1990s, there were allegations that the charity acted as a conduit for al-Qaeda. And in a 2002 federal case, testimony linked them to terror funding networks.
But we should emphasize those were allegations, right?
Yes, strictly allegations. There were no structural convictions. But then, in 2017, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain, and Egypt officially designated them a terror organization.
But the counterweight to that is just as heavy, honestly. The United States, the UN, and the EU never joined that 2017 terror designation.
Right.
The Gulf blockade was eventually lifted in 2021 without those accusations ever being formally adjudicated. Today, Qatar Charity is an official partner of both the UN and U.S. side.
And Qatar itself hosts the Al Udeid Air Base, which is the largest U.S. military facility in the Middle East.
Right, so they are not a proven terror front, but they are also not a neutral relief NGO with a blank past.
Exactly, and this forces us to look at the actual mechanics of how they operate. If an organization has that kind of heavily scrutinized history, how do they operate so freely in European capitals?
Right, how to clear the way for $1 billion coastal real estate development?
Through a mechanism called reputation laundering.
Ah, okay. Let's dig into this.
You buy legitimacy by renting respectable stages. When Qatar Charity pumps money into the Al Fajr Islamic Center and the official Albanian Muslim community, they aren't just building mosques.
What are they doing?
They are buying massive grassroots and political goodwill. Local politicians become highly reluctant to block Qatar's private commercial interests, like the Al-Qayads buying up the coast, because they are terrified of losing the humanitarian funding, keeping their local communities afloat.
Wow, so the charity creates a halo effect that protects the private capital.
Exactly.
And this mechanism isn't like a Qatari invention. We see prestige laundering everywhere. Look at the Prince Albert II of Monaco Foundation.
Oh, this is a perfect documented parallel. It's the exact same mechanism in a totally different theater.
Right. So if you look at the energy sector a few years ago, you had Mykola Zlochevsky, the founder of the Ukrainian gas company Burisma.
Right, a very controversial figure.
Very. Zlochevsky was under intense investigation by the London Serious Fraud Office for money laundering. He needed to clean his reputation fast, so he co-founded an energy security firm in Monte Carlo.
And he didn't just host it himself, right?
No, he managed to co-host it with the Prince Albert II of Monaco Foundation 3 years running. They put Hunter Biden on stage, they partnered with the Atlantic Council, and suddenly, a company under a massive money laundering probe is sharing a stage with European royalty looking completely legitimate.
Now, we need to put up a massive guardrail here. Because when people hear Monaco and Albanian coast in the same sentence, they jump straight to conspiracies.
It's true.
Does this mean Monaco is secretly behind the Cezanne Resort project? Absolutely not.
Yes, we have to be extremely precise here. The fund trace does not point to Monaco.
Not at all. The Prince Albert II Foundation genuinely funds vital environmental work. In fact, right now, they are a key funder of the Monk Seal Alliance.
Oh, right, the seals.
Yeah. That alliance is part of a 41-organization coalition that is actively fighting against the Cezanne Resort to protect the critically endangered Mediterranean monk seal.
Okay, so let's connect that for you. The exact same royal foundation that is currently funding genuine seal conservation to stop this resort is the foundation that lent its prestige to a controversial gas company years earlier.
Precisely.
That past association doesn't taint the seal conservation money today, and it doesn't make the 41 organization coalition political. It just proves the mechanism.
Exactly.
Renting a respectable stage, whether it's a royal foundation in Monaco or an American real estate brand in Albania, is exactly how prestige laundering works. It successfully separates the money from its reputation.
And that brings us right back to the deeds on the Adriatic coast.
Right. So if you cut through the static,
Wow.
If you strip away Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump.
If you ignore the political theater about Iranian bots and Israeli colonization.
Right. What are you actually left with?
You are left with a glittering American brand, billions in Qatari money, an offshore Dutch trust shielding hidden owners, and an Albanian state that rewrote its own environmental laws to fast-track the permits.
The thousands of Albanian protesters holding up their inflatable flamingos, they have a slogan: Albania is not for sale.
And they're exactly right about the sentiment.
They are, but their address needs correcting.
Because the trail of this deal doesn't end in New Jersey with affinity partners. It doesn't end in Jerusalem or with George Soros.
No.
When you follow the corporate registries, the SPAC freezes, and the shifting percentages in the humanitarian ledgers, the trail ends in Doha.
It's a profound shift in geopolitical influence, perfectly masked by a luxury hotel development.
In the summer of 2026, thousands of young Albanians took to the streets of Tirana. Wielding pink inflatable flamingos as their symbol, they clashed with riot police in an ongoing standoff the press dubbed the Flamingo Revolution. The trigger for the chaos was visual. Barbed wire fences had appeared across the Vjosa Narta wetland, a protected ecological reserve and public coastline. Access was cut off overnight. The public face of this development belongs to an American political dynasty. The coastline is slated for a massive luxury resort development spearheaded by Affinity Partners, the investment firm run by Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump. Protesters are demanding a halt to the destruction of a fragile breeding ground for pelicans and flamingos, raising questions about how a foreign developer secured planning and environmental permits to build on legally protected land. While the international media remains fixed on the celebrity drama of Trump Island, the noise in the streets is masking a deeper sovereign transition. Albanian Prime Minister Edi Rama aggressively rejected the protesters' demands. Instead of addressing the land permits, he claimed the movement was part of a hybrid war orchestrated by foreign intelligence. He specifically pointed to Tehran, claiming the environmental protests were being weaponized by Iranian bots and enemies of Israel to undermine Albanian stability. A local dispute over beach access and wildlife habitats is being framed by the highest office in the country as a Middle Eastern geopolitical conflict. But the actual money for this project is in Doha. The American brand is the name on the brochure, but the capital behind the project is Qatari. This isn't a resort story. It's a sovereignty story wearing a resort's clothes. Analytical. Physically, the project exists in two distinct pieces of land with entirely different ownership histories, Sazan Island and the Zvernets mainland. Sazan is an uninhabited former military island. It is state-owned ground where Kushner's firm was granted strategic investor rights to build a resort from scratch. The Zvernets mainland is a different reality. This area consists of private coastal plots with complex post-communist property titles. Local residents claim they were forcibly driven off this land. Those private mainland plots were purchased by Albania Land Development, a company owned by the Qatari billionaire brothers Mutaz and Ramez Al Kayat. When SPOC, Albania's special prosecution against corruption, opened a probe into those mainland property titles, they froze the Qatari company's accounts. Within 24 hours, the accounts were unfrozen to avoid international arbitration. Further paper trails reveal that the offshore trust holding the development permits for this billion-dollar site transferred ownership for €306,000. That transaction moved control out of European shell companies and directly to Middle Eastern investors. The Qatari money doesn't compete with the Trump brand. It sits underneath it as the buyer of the mainland plots, while the celebrity name absorbs the public scrutiny. Curious, zooming out, to see how a Gulf state positioned itself to buy the Albanian coastline, we must trace the flow of crisis capital into the country. In 2011, Qatar provided zero. By 2025, Qatar Charity controlled 72% of the field. The United States, which was the second largest donor in 2022, has vanished from the ledger entirely. The funding ledger reveals a closed loop. Qatar Charity acts as both the donor and the recipient. They originate the cash in Doha and deliver it with their own hands in Albania. Doha spent a decade financing the country's humanitarian and religious infrastructure. By the time the resort permits were issued, Qatar had established a massive footprint in the same water and climate resilience sectors dominating the development zone. Now, examine PM Rama's claims of an anti-Israel hybrid war alongside the Qatari ownership records. By pointing at Iranian bots and enemies of Israel, Rama converts a domestic corruption scandal into a matter of national security. This narrative successfully keeps the Qatari billionaires, their briefly frozen accounts, and their decade of state funding out of the public debate. The Prime Minister's shift into national security rhetoric functions as a shield. It allows the government to label protesters foreign proxies, while the actual sovereign exchange remains off-camera. The American name on an Albanian beach draws the world's eyes, while the Qatari deed holders move in the background. The people in the streets are authentically angry. They are fighting to protect their property titles and a natural habitat from backroom deals. But understanding the forces moving against them requires looking past the celebrity developers and partisan bait. The Flamingo Revolution is a warning. In global politics, the story isn't what they shout at you, it's what they actively omit.
So if you're listening to this right now, I want you to just sort of imagine that you're settling in for a really long flight. You pull out your phone, you throw your headphones on, and you load up a popular interview show.
Right. Yeah, you're just trying to zone out for a bit.
Exactly. You're zoning out. But then you hear Ivanka Trump, and she's talking about her family's next massive real estate venture. And, the pitch she delivers is just flawless.
Oh, it's meticulously curated.
Yeah. She paints this picture of, absolute serenity, untouched nature, that whole effortless, barefoot luxury aesthetic. She literally describes how she and Jared Kushner were just swimming off a friend's yacht in the crystal clear waters of the Mediterranean.
As one does.
Right, as one does. And suddenly, rising out of the sea, they discovered this breathtaking 1,400-hectare island. And she talks about hiking across it barefoot, feeling this raw energy of the land.
Yeah, and deciding right then and there to bring in, quote, the greatest living architects of our time.
Yes, to build this off-grid paradise. It sounds like the opening pages of a glossy travel magazine, Just a place completely detached from the noise of the modern world.
It's the ultimate architectural fantasy.
Yeah.
Just this virgin landscape, completely isolated, waiting for a visionary developer to mold it into a masterpiece for the global elite.
And this is where we have to pause, because if you take your headphones off, right, if you step out of that perfectly produced audio bubble and you actually look at the reality on the ground at that exact same project location in May and June of 2026.
The collision is violent.
It is absolutely violent. We are not looking at barefoot billionaires. We are looking at what the local Albanian press has actually dubbed the Flamingo Revolution.
Which is such a striking name for it.
It really is. The streets of Tirana, the capital, and the coastal city of Vlora, they are just boiling over. You have thousands of Albanian citizens marching, chanting, "Albania is not for sale," and they're holding these massive banners telling Ivanka to go home.
And the footage coming out of these protests, it is visceral.
Yeah, it's not just people holding signs. We're talking about documented video of a local protester being physically dragged off a rocky cliff by private security guards.
With state police just standing right there.
Literally standing by while pepper spray is deployed completely indiscriminately into crowds of locals and environmentalists. And, bobbing above this whole sea of furious, shouting citizens are these bright, pink, inflatable flamingos.
Right, which the protesters are using as this symbol of the fragile ecosystem that they are desperately trying to protect.
Exactly. And the anger is just so intense that it has culminated in these deafening nationwide calls for the Prime Minister of Albania, Edi Rama, to resign.
The juxtaposition is just... it's difficult to process at first glance. On one hand, you have the velvet rope narrative, right? The serene private island retreat. And on the other hand, you have riot police, chemical irritants, and thousands of people alleging that their country is being stolen out from under them.
And when you have a story that features a Trump son-in-law, bulldozers, and a legally protected European coastline, the narrative honestly just writes itself.
It slots perfectly into the preconceived political biases of basically everyone on the planet.
It does. But here is the danger, and this is what we really want to focus on in this deep dive today. A story that writes itself is almost always a story where people stop looking.
Exactly. You see the massive headlines, you recognize the famous names.
Kushner, Trump, Soros.
Right, all of them. And your brain just tells you, oh, I already understand the entire picture here.
Which is the greatest illusion in modern global politics.
Because this deep dive, it involves billions of dollars, sovereign nations, high-stakes global leverage. We cannot afford to be sloppy here.
So we are going to separate every single piece of information into 3 distinct tiers. And I want to define these tiers clearly for you listening, and we are not going to collapse them at any point.
Right. Walk me through the mechanics of that. What actually qualifies as Tier 1?
Tier 1 is confirmed fact. This is the bedrock. So this includes the verified Qatari ownership of the land development company holding the Zvernek mainland.
Okay.
It includes the actual audited ledger of humanitarian funding from 2011 to the present. It includes the Prime Minister's own recorded public statement.
Right, you can't really argue with a recording.
Exactly. It also includes Prime Minister Rama's heavily documented relationship with the Open Society Foundations. And, crucially, it includes the verified tax filings of the conservation philanthropies that are actually funding these environmental NGOs. These are items that simply cannot be reasonably disputed.
So basically, paper trails, public statements, legal filings. That's Tier 1. So what is Tier 2?
Tier 2 is allegation. So these are claims that are actively being investigated or reported by credible, independent sources. But, and this is key, they have not yet been proven in a court of law.
Got it. So what falls under that umbrella here?
This tier includes the dispossession claims made by local residents who say their land was stolen. It includes the incredibly complex organized crime network claims reported by the Balkan Investigative Reporting Network.
BRN. They do great work.
They really do. It also includes the active preliminary probe by Subcabinet, which is Albania's special prosecution against corruption and organized crime. And crucially, it includes the decades-old terror financing testimony regarding Qatar Charity from a 2002 federal trial. We will discuss these, but we have to consistently label them as allegations.
Not settled truths. Understood. And that leaves Tier 3.
Right. Tier 3 is contested. The prime example here is the 2017 terror designation of Qatar Charity.
Right, because that designation was made by Qatar's Gulf rivals during a highly politicized blockade.
Exactly. It was not recognized by the United States or the UN or the EU. It is a contested geopolitical weapon, not an objective legal fact.
Okay, so I want to pause here and just make a promise to you, the listener. We will never blow these lines. We are impartially reporting the facts contained in our sources. If we encounter politically charged viewpoints from the left or the right, we are not endorsing them.
Right. We are just analyzing the ideas and narratives contained in the source material. We are never going to assert a grand conspiracy that we cannot trace directly back to the provided documents. We are following the paperwork, full stop.
And honestly, that is the only way to dismantle a smokescreen. You follow the paper.
Always. So let's actually start with the physical reality of the land itself. Because Sazan Island isn't just, some generic stretch of white sand that someone stumbled upon.
No, its geography and its history are wild.
Insanely wild. From 1947 all the way up to 1992, during the communist era under Enver Hoxha, this island was entirely sealed off from the public. It was essentially the seaward fortress of Albania.
Right. If you look at a map, it sits right at the critical strategic choke point of the Strait of Otranto. That's where the Adriatic Sea meets the Ionian and the Mediterranean.
And the paranoia of that specific era left the island literally honeycombed with over 3,600 military bunkers and subterranean tunnels.
3,600 bunkers on one island.
Yeah, it is literally a monument to Cold War isolation.
Wow. And because it was isolated from human development for over half a century, the surrounding ecosystem flourished in a way that is incredibly rare in the modern Mediterranean.
Right. So the waters surrounding Sazan Island are designated as a marine national park. And crucially, it holds a SPAMI designation.
Now, what does SPAMI actually mean in practice? Because, is that just a plaque they put on a beach to make tourists feel good? Or does it have actual legal teeth?
Oh, it has serious legal teeth. SPAMA stands for Specially Protected Areas of Mediterranean Importance. It is this rigorous international framework designed to protect vital biodiversity.
Right. So what lives there that's so important?
Well, the waters around Sazan are home to the endangered Mediterranean monk seal.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But perhaps more importantly to the broader global climate, it's home to these vast underwater meadows of Posidonia oceanica.
The seagrass.
Exactly. These seagrass meadows are essentially the lungs of the Mediterranean. They act as massive carbon sinks, and they're the foundational breeding ground for countless marine species. You cannot simply drop a luxury marina on top of a SPAMA zone without catastrophic ecological consequences.
Oh, this is but Sazan Island is only half the story. And this is where the mainstream reporting constantly fails, right? They blur the island together with a second, entirely distinct piece of land on the mainland coast.
Yes, the Kushner project is split. The second piece is the Zvernek mainland.
Right. And this is a coastal stretch bordering the VETOS Narca wetland. So if Sazan is about monk seals and underwater meadows, Zvernek is about rare sand dunes and migratory birds.
This is where the famous flamingos are located.
Hence the Flamingo Revolution.
Exactly. It's a highly sensitive, legally protected landscape that supports over 200 bird species, including, like, Dalmatian pelicans.
Which brings us to the first massive sort of mechanical question of this whole saga. How is anyone, whether it's an American brand or a Gulf state, how are they allowed to build a massive 5-star luxury resort with 10,000 accommodation units right in the middle of a national park and a protected wetland?
Right. Don't these environmental laws prevent exactly this kind of concrete footprint?
Normally, yes. But if you have the backing of the state, you don't break the law. You just change the law.
Boom.
Yeah. So in March of 2024, the Albanian government passed an incredibly controversial piece of legislation called Law 2020-24. And this was a targeted amendment to Albania's protected areas regime.
How did they justify tearing up the protections? Like, what was the legal fiction they used there?
They created a bespoke loophole. The amendment essentially stated that while normal construction is banned in these sensitive zones, exceptions can be made for, quote, structures of excellence, 5 stars or more, and their associated hospitality activity.
That is wild. Wait, so they literally wrote into the legal code that if you are rich enough and your hotel is luxurious enough, the environmental protections simply cease to exist for you.
That's exactly it.
So a 3-star hotel would destroy the environment, but a 5-star hotel is a structure of excellence.
That is exactly the mechanism. They literally paved the way for the bulldozers using parliamentary procedure. And that specific legal maneuver is what set the stage for the physical violence that sparked the Flamingo Revolution.
So let's look at that timeline because it escalates fast. On May 30th, 2026, the developers arrive at the protected coastal area of Zernip Porto Novo, and they just begin erecting fences.
Using a highly disputed work permit, by the way.
Right, a highly disputed permit to justify laying the groundwork. And naturally, the local residents, the farmers, the environmental activists, they show up to physically block the fencing because they are defending what they believed was legally and rightfully protected land.
And the response from the developers was to deploy private force. They hired private security personnel from 2 companies, Murdo Security and Major Security. And the footage of what happened next. Again, this is Tier 1 confirmed.
Yeah, we have the video.
During the protest, these private guards physically assaulted the demonstrators. We aren't talking about gently moving people away. We are talking about violence.
The detail that really sticks with me is the resident being forcibly dragged off a cliff edge and literally pulled inside the fenced construction zone.
It's terrifying.
And the most disturbing part is that the people doing the dragging weren't even wearing the uniforms of the contracted security structure. They were essentially unidentified civilians acting as muscle for the developers.
And while this civilian-on-civilian violence is occurring, the state police are entirely passive. The Albanian Helsinki Committee, which is a highly respected human rights monitor, they observed the entire situation.
Right.
And they confirmed that the protest was entirely peaceful until it was violently escalated by these unauthorized personnel. The state police stood by. They did not intervene to protect the citizens. Instead, the situation devolved into absolute chaos. Pepper spray was deployed so recklessly that it actually incapacitated police officers and a working journalist.
The image of the state police standing frozen while private muscle drags a local citizen across the rocks, I mean, that is the exact moment this stopped being a local zoning dispute.
Yeah, that's a paradigm shift.
It became a massive flashing neon sign pointing towards state capture. And the government eventually felt so much heat from this that they were forced to revoke the licenses of Murto and Major Security.
And SPAC had to launch preliminary probes.
Right. But the damage was done. By June, thousands of people were marching in the capital city of Tirana, facing down water cannons and chanting for Edi Rama to step down.
And this is the critical juncture in our deep dive. You have thousands of citizens in the streets, a pristine coastline at risk, and a government seemingly bending over backwards to accommodate luxury developers.
Yep.
When the global news media finally parachutes in to cover a protest of this magnitude, especially one with a name like Trump or Kushner attached to it, the internet algorithms take over.
The story gets fed straight into the global outrage machine. And immediately, predictably, the narrative splinters into 2 completely distinct, highly weaponized, and entirely false stories about who the villain actually is.
Let's lay out these 2 loud narratives because understanding why they exist is key to seeing through them.
Go for it.
So Camp 1 is a narrative largely driven by online commentators. They often lean left or operate in anti-colonial frameworks. They claim that Israel is the hidden hand behind the Sazan takeover.
Right. So they look at Jared Kushner's background, his Jewish heritage, his political ties to the Israeli government during the Trump administration, his history of Israeli investments.
Right. All those data points.
And from those data points, they spin this grand, sweeping narrative that this resort is actually a secret colonization project, like a covert Israeli agenda to capture strategic Albanian coastline.
Exactly. That is the Israel did it framing.
Yeah.
It taps into existing geopolitical anxieties regarding the Middle East and just maps them directly onto an Albanian beach.
Yeah.
But then you have Camp 2, which takes the exact opposite approach, usually pushed by a completely different political demographic.
Camp 2 claims that the environmentalists and the locals don't actually care about flamingos or monk seals at all.
Shocker.
Right. They argue that the entire flamingo revolution is a manufactured color revolution. They point the finger directly at George Soros, the National Endowment for Democracy, the NED, and this massive cabal of foreign Western NGOs.
They claim these groups are funding fake protests to destabilize and overthrow the Albanian government.
I want you to just think about how absurd this is for a moment. We have organic local protests happening in real time. Albanian citizens are angry that their beach was fenced off by private security.
Real people, real fences.
Yes, and yet the global internet is screaming that it is either a sophisticated Israeli colonization plot or a multi-million-dollar Soros-funded coup.
If I'm listening to this, my brain is breaking a little bit. We have two massive global boogeymen being blamed for the exact same physical event.
Right, so how do we even begin to figure out which one is the real puppet master?
By recognizing the tell. The fact that these two massive narratives are pointed in completely opposite geopolitical directions is your first clue that neither is true.
Right, they cancel each other out.
They're designed to trigger different partisan reflexes, not to actually explain reality. So we're going to take both of these narratives and we're going to crash them against the hard rocks of our evidentiary discipline.
Love it.
We will look at the financial filings, we will look at the public records, and we're going to start by entirely demolishing the Soros pincer.
Let's do it. Because the irony of the Soros accusation in this specific Albanian context is so thick, you could literally cut it with a knife.
Oh, it's incredible.
The people screaming that Soros NGOs are manufacturing these protests against the Albanian government are getting the target completely backwards.
They absolutely are. If you look at the confirmed Tier 1 data points regarding Albanian politics over the last 30 years, the man pushing for this luxury resort, Prime Minister Edi Rama, is arguably the preeminent Soros-aligned political figure in the Balkans.
It's wild. Let's look at the receipts here. Alex Soros, George Soros' son and the current chair of the Open Society Foundations, has literally and publicly referred to Prime Minister Edi Rama as his, quote, brother in Tirana.
That's not a secret. They have a heavily documented, very close working relationship.
Right. And if we look at the financial ledgers between 1992 and 2020, the Open Society Foundations poured over $131 million into Albania.
And what did that money do? The director of OSF Albania didn't hide it. He publicly stated that the foundation was the main funder of the entire reform process in the country. Let's look at the crown jewel of that reform process, the 2016 justice reform.
Okay, explain what that justice reform actually was, because it sounds like, generic political jargon.
Sure. It was a massive systemic overhaul of the Albanian judiciary, heavily backed and funded by the Open Society Foundations. The goal was to root out entrenched corruption.
Okay.
And the United States government, through USA, added an astonishing $270 million over 15 years to support this Soros-tied justice reform effort.
$270 million. Wow.
And the primary creation of this massive influx of Western funding was SPAC.
SPAC, the Special Prosecution Against Corruption and Organized Crime.
Exactly. A SPAC is the very anti-corruption structure that the local protesters are currently begging to intervene and stop the Kushner resort.
This is incredible. So the narrative claims that Soros is funding the protesters to attack the government. But the reality is that the protesters are appealing to an agency SPAC that was built with Soros and USA money in order to stop a prime minister who is deeply aligned with Soros.
Exactly. If Soros were pulling the strings to manufacture a crisis, he would be pulling them on behalf of his brother in Tirana, Edi Rama, not the people throwing inflatable flamingos at riot police.
It is a complete inversion of reality. And honestly, the ties between Rama's government and Western intelligence structures go even deeper into some incredibly dark territory. Like, look at the Charles McGonigal FBI bribery case.
Oh, walk me through the mechanics of that case, because it is wild.
Okay, so Charles McGonigal was the former special agent in charge of the counterintelligence division for the FBI in New York.
Right, one of the highest-ranking intelligence officials in the United States.
Exactly. And he was convicted and sentenced to prison for taking secret, illicit payments. And the locus of that corruption scandal runs straight through Prime Minister Rama's office. McGonigal was allegedly investigating political rivals of Edi Rama, utilizing information provided by a confidential informant connected to Rama's circle.
So let me get this straight. You have a prime minister who is deeply intertwined with the Open Society Foundations, heavily supported by USA justice reform, and linked to a corrupt former FBI counterintelligence chief.
Yes.
The idea that Soros and the West are funding street protests to overthrow him is laughable.
Completely laughable. But we can't just look at Rama, right? We have to look at the protesters. If Soros isn't funding the environmental groups, who is?
To answer that, we have to trace the money behind the famous concern letter.
Yes, the letter.
Right. So on January 22, 2026, a massive coalition of 41 environmental organizations from 28 different countries published a formal letter demanding an immediate halt to the Sezon Island project.
Right. They specifically cited the threat to the Mediterranean monk seal and warned that the project was a blatant violation of the environmental standards required for EU accession.
And the proponents of the color revolution theory, they point directly to this letter. They say, look, 41 foreign NGOs are interfering in Albanian domestic policy. This is obviously a funded coordination operation by Western intelligence and dark money.
Right. It looks like a smoking gun if you don't actually read it.
Exactly. But when you actually open up the financial filings of these 41 organizations, the entire conspiracy theory evaporates.
Let's do it. We have the Tier 1 documents. So the letter was coordinated by a group called PPNE. What is PPNE?
It is the Protection and Preservation of Natural Environment in Albania. They are the official BirdLife international partner for the country.
So this is a mainstream domestic bird conservation group, not a covert CIA operations unit.
Far from it.
And when you trace the funding of the other signatories organizations like Eco Albania, the Society for the Protection of Prespa, the Monk Seal Alliance, where does the money actually originate?
It traces back almost entirely to established conservation philanthropy. We're talking about funds from the Prince Albert II of Monaco Foundation.
Okay, actual state conservation money.
Right. We are talking about MFO, which was a major Swiss biodiversity endowment created by the founder of the WWF. We're talking about Foundation Segre and mainstream German environmental funds like the Deutsche Bundesstiftung Umwelt.
And we're also talking about Patagonia, the outdoor apparel company. They poured massive funding into the campaign to protect the VETOS River in Albania.
This is the decisive test for the Soros manufactured it theory. When you dig into the ledgers of these 41 environmental groups, there is zero money from the National Endowment for Democracy.
Zero.
There is zero money from USAID. There is zero money from the Open Society Foundations. There is zero money from the Arabella network of dark money groups in the U.S. And there is zero money from any Gulf source.
So it is purely nature, money funding nature projects.
Exactly. And there was a piece of context here that I find absolutely stunning because it shows how quickly political narratives flip.
Yeah, this part is amazing.
This exact same network of conservationist groups like UNNATURAL, Eco Albania, and Patagonia are the very people that Prime Minister Edi Rama was celebrating just 3 years ago.
Let that sink in. In March of 2023, Rama stood side by side with the CEO of Patagonia to proudly declare the creation of the VETOS Wild River National Park.
He praised these environmental NGOs to the sky when they were helping him secure a positive green legacy on the world stage.
Right. The conservationists didn't change their mission. They didn't suddenly transform into foreign agents. Rama changed his priorities.
Exactly.
The geography they're standing in front of changed from a river he wanted to protect for his legacy to a coastal resort he wants to build for foreign capital. The Soros manufactured the protest story dies completely on the financial filings and the historical record.
It is a textbook misdirection. So, having demolished the Soros pincer, we must pivot and examine the other side of the distraction, the Israel narrative.
Right. Because if it's not Soros and the money traces back to pure conservation, then we have to ask why people are pointing in the exact opposite direction toward Israel.
Right.
Now, as we noted, some of this comes from random online commentators pushing anti-colonial theories, but the most dangerous and loudest framing doesn't come from anonymous Twitter accounts. It comes directly from Prime Minister Edi Rama himself.
Yes. we must look at the Prime Minister's exact confirmed statements. During the height of the protests, Rama gave an interview to Euronews, and he didn't talk about flamingos or monk seals.
No, he did not.
He called the protests a hybrid war. He explicitly stated that the environmental concerns of well-meaning citizens were being weaponized by the enemies of Albania and of Israel.
He went even further than that. He pointed the finger directly at the Iranians, suggesting that Tehran was orchestrating the pushback against the resort.
Which is quite a leap.
A massive leap. He dismissed the thousands of citizens marching in Tirana as, quote, a lot of bots, a lot of fake profiles. He even addressed this fringe online rumor about a hidden deal between him, Benjamin Netanyahu, and Jared Kushner to resettle Palestinians in Albania.
Branding it a total fantasy.
Right. And to top it all off, he told CNN that there is no such thing as a Trump family island.
He is just flooding the zone with massive geopolitical buzzwords, hybrid war, Iranian proxies, enemies of Israel. When you see a leader deploy language like that regarding a local zoning and environmental dispute, you have to apply the fundamental investigative test. Cui bono?
Who benefits?
Who benefits from this framing?
Well, let's unpack the utility of that rhetoric. Why would the Prime Minister of Albania go on international television and try to convince the world that local farmers and environmentalists who are angry about a fence are actually part of a sophisticated Iranian-backed hybrid war attack on Israel?
Because the primary beneficiary of that framing is Rama himself. Think about the mechanical brilliance of this maneuver.
It's dark, but it is smart.
It is. By recasting a domestic scandal, one rooted in alleged land corruption, the dispossession of local farmers, and the destruction of a protected ecosystem, by recasting that as a foreign geopolitical attack on Israel, Rama fundamentally alters the battlefield.
He changes the genre of the story. It goes from a story about a corrupt real estate deal to a story about global terrorism. It allows him to brand organic local protesters as dangerous anti-Semites and agents of Iran.
Exactly. He transforms a rule of law problem into a national security problem.
And those have very different solutions.
Yes. When a state faces a rule of law problem, the solution is transparency in courts. When a state faces a national security problem, the solution is riot police, emergency powers, and revoking the licenses of anyone who gets in the way.
Wow.
It provides a convenient, internationally acceptable excuse for crushing genuine civic grievances under the guise of maintaining stability against a foreign threat.
So I want to be extremely careful here to maintain our evidentiary discipline. We are impartially analyzing the mechanics of political rhetoric. We absolutely do not endorse the fringe online theory that Israel did it.
No.
And simultaneously, we explicitly reject Rama's smear that the local Albanian protesters are anti-Semites or Iranian proxies. We are staying above both of these false narratives.
And if you want the ultimate proof that the anti-Israel operation framing is a total fabrication, you only have to look back at that concern letter signed by the 41 NGOs.
Yes. This is the detail that completely shatters Rama's narrative.
It really does.
Signatory number 22 on that massive coalition list, standing shoulder to shoulder with the Albanian locals demanding a halt to the project, is an Israeli NGO.
The organization is called Delphis. They are an Israeli nonprofit entirely focused on marine mammal conservation in the Mediterranean. They signed the letter because they care about the monk seals, not because they're part of an Iranian hybrid war.
An Israeli NGO is officially part of the coalition fighting to stop the Kushner resort. That single fact completely destroys the Prime Minister's attempt to frame the protests as an anti-Israel operation. The Israel framing, just like the Soros framing, is nothing but a massive, incredibly cynical smokescreen.
So if the villain isn't George Soros, and the villain isn't an Israeli colonization plot, what are these smokescreens designed to hide?
Well, before we reveal exactly whose name is on the deed, we really have to look at a chilling precedent. Because what is happening on the Albanian coast right now is not a new playbook. We have seen this exact structural template executed before.
Very recently, actually.
Yeah, it literally just played out one country over, in Serbia.
This is a vital Tier 1 confirmed precedent. So in Belgrade, Serbia, there was a plan for another Kushner-linked luxury complex. The target for this development was highly controversial. It was the bombed-out former Yugoslav Ministry of Defense building right in the center of the city.
Explain why that specific building matters. Because it's not just an empty lot.
Oh, no. It is a profoundly sensitive cultural heritage zone. The building was bombed during the 1999 NATO intervention. For many Serbians, the ruined structure stands as a solemn monument and a symbol of national resistance.
Right. It is legally protected as a cultural monument. To propose replacing it with an American luxury hotel is intensely provocative.
But just like in Albania, the Serbian government wanted the Kushner project to happen. In November 2025, the Serbian parliament executed a specific mechanical maneuver to bypass the protections.
A special law.
Yes. They passed a special law to clear the way for construction, effectively lifting the cultural monument status. Following that law, the government signed a 99-year lease agreement with Kushner's company, Affinity Global Development.
They passed a special law to enable a bespoke development. Sound familiar?
It is the exact same mechanism used in Albania with Law 2/2024.
But in Serbia, the playbook hit a wall. In December 2025, just weeks after the lease was signed, Serbia's prosecutor for organized crime stepped in and announced massive criminal charges.
Right. Who did they charge?
They charged a government culture minister, Nikola Selakovic, who is a close ally of the Serbian president, along with 3 other officials. The charges were for abuse of office and falsifying documents.
How do you falsify documents in a real estate deal involving a national monument?
Well, the allegation is that they forged the specific administrative documentation required to illegally strip the building of its protected cultural status, allowing that 99-year lease to proceed.
And once those organized crime charges were filed by the prosecutor, the political heat became entirely too radioactive, and Kushner actually withdrew from the project.
Right. Look at the structural template here. Step 1. Identify a highly sensitive or legally protected site. Step 2. Ram a special law through Parliament to lift those protections for a specific American investor. Step 3. An organized crime prosecutor steps in to investigate document fraud and abuse of office behind the scenes.
It's like watching a play where you already know the script. Special law lifts protection, organized crime prosecutor charges document fraud.
And now we shift our gaze back to the Adriatic coast in Albania, and we watch the exact same template running in real time.
The Persian Gulf explain why a Qatari charity suddenly starts pouring millions of dollars into Albania.
Because 2017 is the hinge point of modern Qatari foreign policy. Faced with severe allegations of illicit financing and completely cut off by their immediate neighbors, Doha realized they were deeply vulnerable.
They needed to radically reorganize their global posture.
They executed 2 strategic maneuvers to survive. First, a massive campaign of soft power rehabilitation. They decided to pour staggering amounts of money into highly visible, undeniable humanitarian work to rebuild their global brand and counter the terror financing narratives.
Okay, and the second?
Second, they desperately needed to build new alliances outside the hostile Gulf region.
And if you were looking for a place to build alliances outside the Middle East, the Balkans is the perfect strategic theater.
It is flawless. Albania is Muslim majority, so the cultural and religious ties are easily established. It is located inside Europe. It has intense aspirations to join the European Union. And geographically, it sits on prime strategic real estate on the Adriatic Sea.
The arc suddenly makes perfect sense. You have the 2017 Gulf blockade, which triggers Qatar's desperate need for a soft power pivot toward Europe.
Yeah.
Then, the tragic 2019 Albanian earthquake strikes. This provides the perfect unassailable opening for Doha to deploy massive humanitarian aid at scale to a devastated country.
Right. By 2021, Qatar has successfully replaced the United States to become the dominant funder in the country.
And by 2024, having secured immense leverage over the political class through years of vital aid, Qatari private capital begins acquiring Albania's most valuable, legally protected coastal real estate.
It is a brilliantly executed ecosystem of influence.
The phrase that defines this entire geopolitical maneuver is charity to concrete. The state-funded charity paves the political road, and the private concrete follows right behind it.
Charity to concrete. It is brilliant, and it brings us back to the grand delusion that has completely consumed the global media. The American name, Jared Kushner, Ivanka Trump, barefoot luxury, that is the dazzling billboard.
Is the hood ornament designed to grab all the algorithmic attention, all the partisan outrage, and all the clicks.
Exactly. The opposing narratives blaming Israel or blaming George Soros, those are the heavy smokescreens, happily pumped out by compliant politicians like Edi Rama to distract the public, demonize the organic local protesters, and keep the world from looking at the paperwork.
But when you apply strict evidentiary discipline, when you clear away the billboard and the smoke, you find the stark reality.
You find that the Gulf money is quietly sitting on the deed.
What?
The very state that's spent a decade systematically replacing Western aid to become Albania's primary humanitarian lifeline is now successfully utilizing shell companies and offshore trusts to buy up its most valuable, environmentally protected coastline.
Which brings us back to you, the listener. If you are sitting on that flight, wondering why you should care about a property dispute involving an Albanian beach, the answer is that this is a terrifying masterclass in modern information literacy.
Oh, absolutely. We are living in an era of unprecedented information overload. The internet is built to serve you headlines designed to trigger your deepest partisan outrage by using familiar political boogeymen.
When you see massive global headlines screaming that a local crisis is the fault of Israel or the fault of Soros or the fault of some shadowy cabal of NGOs, you have to hit the pause button.
You have to cultivate the discipline to look past the algorithmic outrage. You have to look at the dry, boring paperwork. You have to trace the funding of the environmental groups.
You have to ask the fundamental question of cui bono. Who benefits from this specific geopolitical distraction?
And most importantly, you have to find out whose name is actually on the bank transfers and the property deeds. This story isn't really about a Trump son-in-law. It is a story about the real grinding mechanics of global capital.
It shows exactly how state-backed charity can be weaponized to pave the way for private mega developments.
And it shows how local environments, endangered species like the monk seal, and ordinary citizens are simply caught and crushed in the gears of foreign wealth and domestic corruption.
We've just spent the last hour dissecting how a single celebrity American brand name can act as a dazzling, impenetrable facade. A facade that effectively blinds the world's media to a massive, multi-billion-dollar geopolitical maneuver by a foreign state.
And if you understand the mechanics of how easily they pulled this off in Albania, it forces you to change how you view the world around you. Look at the skyline of your own nearest major city.
Look at the glittering new developments, the luxury high-rises, or the massive mega projects making headlines in your own country right now.
If Kushner and Sazan Island taught us anything, it's that the loudest story is rarely the true story. What other massive global maneuvers are hiding their true architects right in plain sight, just waiting for someone to finally read the deed?
All right, let's jump straight into today's explainer. We're unpacking a really fascinating recent dispatch that points to a massive structural vulnerability right inside the State Department. Specifically, it's about the president's diplomatic channels. If you track how foreign policy is actually executed behind closed doors, the real gears of the machine, you are definitely going to want to stick around for this one.
The source sets the stakes right out of the gate. They argue that in today's world, where we're looking at overlapping crises, hostile actors, and super delicate negotiations all happening at once, the agility of American diplomacy isn't just a luxury. It is a strict matter of national security. The president's ability to swiftly deploy a trusted representative at a moment's notice, well, that can literally be the difference between containing a fire and letting it spread.
So, to make sense of these claims, here is our quick roadmap. We'll look at the need for diplomatic agility, the two different types of special envoys, and this alleged unauthorized bureaucratic veto. Then we'll dig into two specific cases, Albania and Tom Barrack, before wrapping up with the ultimate cost to our foreign policy.
Okay, starting with Section 1, the need for diplomatic agility.
According to the dispatch, the sheer speed of modern geopolitical threats means the president absolutely must have flexible tools that can operate completely outside the slow, grinding machinery of traditional bureaucracy. But here's the catch. The author warns that this critical flexibility is being quietly disabled. And surprise, it's not by foreign adversaries. The text alleges this throttling is actually an inside job, orchestrated from within the State Department by a subcabinet official who is acting way outside their intended role.
That takes us to Section 2, the two types of special envoys, personal versus statutory.
Now, what's really interesting here is how the law distinguishes between the kinds of diplomats a president can deploy. On one hand, you've got statutory envoys. These are positions created by Congress to tackle defined problems, and they generally require Senate confirmation. But on the other hand, you have personal envoys. Under Article 2 of the Constitution, these folks carry the president's voice directly. They serve purely at the president's pleasure, and crucially, they answer to absolutely no one beneath the Oval Office.
So where exactly is that legal line drawn? Well, the dispatch points out that the boundary is the Appointments Clause. Think of it as a constitutional threshold. As long as a personal envoy doesn't cross the line into exercising significant authority pursuant to the laws of the United States, they don't need the Senate's blessing. They remain a pure, unfiltered channel directly for the president. And this brings us to the author's core structural argument. Because these personal envoys don't officially report to the Deputy Secretary of State, any interference from that office is, quite frankly, out of bounds. The text argues that since there's zero supervisory line from the Deputy Secretary down to a personal envoy, any attempt to sideline them functions as an unauthorized, improvised veto. Which leads right into Section 3, the unauthorized bureaucratic veto. Let's look at the specific conduct reviewed by the source, because it outlines this escalating pattern of throttling the president's channels. It doesn't just start with an outright firing. It's more insidious. It starts with Step 1, micromanaging and restricting the envoy's travel. Then Step 2, actively instructing U.S. embassies to cancel meetings with them. And finally, Step 3, using public social media declarations to signal to the world that an envoy's time is up, completely undercutting their international credibility. And the author notes that the communications they reviewed show this isn't just some isolated office friction. The Deputy Secretary allegedly confirmed in writing that he instructed embassies to cancel these meetings and copied a whole bunch of department personnel on it. Plus, it wasn't just one envoy. The source notes another high-profile envoy, Nick Adams, reportedly faced the exact same barrage of restrictive emails. 2 instances? Yeah, the author argues that constitutes a documented pattern.
Moving to Section 4. Sidelining envoys, the Albania case. To show why this bureaucratic infighting actually matters in the real world, the author presents a hypothetical, but one that is firmly grounded in actual canceled travel plans. Imagine a foreign head of government extends a standing invitation to a U.S. envoy, but the State Department steps in and withholds the travel support. The source asks, what if that foreign leader was the Prime Minister of Albania, trying to arrange talks just weeks before major protests erupted there?
If that envoy hadn't been grounded, could the situation in Albania look entirely different today? While the author acknowledges we can't know for sure, we don't have a crystal ball, they argue that the unmeasurable cost of a missed diplomatic opportunity is exactly the point. The fact that we will literally never know the answer is an unacceptable danger. You just don't shut a foreign leader's open door. And that brings us to Section 5, Sidelining Envoys, the Tom Barrack case. Now, this bureaucratic tension spilled out into the open even more dramatically in our next case study. The author describes what happened to envoy Tom Barrack as a quiet excommunication. When Barrack's time-limited appointment naturally ended, it wasn't handled discreetly. Instead, the deputy allegedly ordered the secretary's social media team to publicly announce the end of his appointment. In the diplomatic world, that is a massive blinking neon sign telling professionals everywhere that this guy is finished. But here's the thing. This public maneuvering completely backfired. Remember how these personal envoys answer only to the president? Well, the president simply reappointed Barrack the very next day. And not only was he reinstated, but he was given an expanded mandate covering both Syria and Iraq. It forced the State Department's social media team to actually scramble and walk back their previous post. Talk about awkward. Let's wrap things up with Section 6, the cost of foreign policy. Building on all of this, how does the author suggest we actually fix it? Well, their solution isn't to play defense. It's highly offensive. The dispatch argues the president should multiply these envoys to build a ready reserve. Don't shrink away, name more of them, explicitly clear their path, and use them to totally bypass institutional resistance. The author makes the point that senior official energy shouldn't be wasted policing the president's choices. It should be aimed at embedded actors who are actively slowing down duly elected policy. Ultimately, the text argues that these direct, personal channels are absolutely essential for a fast-moving world. Because they arrive without bureaucratic equities or specific career ladders to protect, they allow pure, unedited communication to happen much faster. It keeps back channels safe, so actual understandings can be reached before they inevitably leak to the press or just dissolve in the slow interagency machine. Which brings us to our final takeaway, leaving us with a highly provocative thought straight from the source. At a moment of maximum global danger, with a threat surface this incredibly wide, should a single subordinate official have the power to decide how much of the world the President of the United States gets to talk to? It really is a fascinating look at the hidden mechanics of diplomacy, and it definitely leaves you wanting to dig deeper into the bureaucratic battles shaping our world.
I want you to just imagine a scenario for a second. You know, pretend you are the CEO of a massive multinational corporation.
Okay.
And the company is facing overlapping crises, right? Supply chain meltdowns, aggressive competitors, hostile takeovers, just the works.
Yeah, a total mess.
Exactly. So you do what any smart executive would do. You dispatch your most trusted, specialized fixer to fly across the world and close this critical, time-sensitive deal.
Right.
And this is someone you handpick, someone who, speaks with your full authority.
Like a direct proxy.
Yes. But when your fixer gets to the airport, their ticket has been canceled. Their corporate card is completely shut off.
Oh, wow.
Right. They're literally locked out of the building. And here is the kicker, right? It wasn't your rival who did it.
Wait, who was it?
It was a middle manager inside your own company who secretly went into the system and pulled the plug.
I mean, that's the ultimate inside sabotage.
Yeah.
And if you are that CEO, your immediate question isn't just, who did this? It's how is our system built in a way that actually allows a middle manager to override my direct orders?
Right. It makes zero sense in the business world, and it makes, frankly, even less sense when the stakes are global security.
Absolutely.
But that is exactly what we're looking at today. So, welcome to today's deep dive. We are taking a massive stack of source material, constitutional law, State Department communications that were reviewed by Torres, federal financial disclosures.
It's a huge stack.
It really is. And we are unpacking a glaring structural vulnerability inside United States diplomacy. Specifically, we're looking at Deputy Secretary of State Christopher Landau.
Right.
And how he appears to be operating this unauthorized veto over the president's special envoys.
Yeah, and before we really get into the weeds here, I want to set the table for everyone listening.
Please do.
Because we have to establish some strict parameters for this deep dive.
Good idea.
We are going to draw very clear lines between what is documented fact, what is attributed reporting from sources, and what are just incredibly important questions that demand answers.
Yeah, no wild speculation, just the facts.
Exactly. We aren't inventing motives, but we are going to look at the paper trail.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to understand why cutting this diplomatic phone line is so dangerous, we have to look at the environment, right?
We do, because the U.S. is currently facing an unusually broad threat surface.
It's not just one thing right now.
No, we're not just dealing with one regional conflict or like one isolated trade dispute. We are looking at overlapping global crises.
Right.
Active, hot conflicts in multiple theaters. Simultaneous, incredibly delicate negotiations across dozens of governments all at once.
And in that kind of environment, speed is your primary weapon, isn't it?
Speed is everything. But the traditional, interagency process in Washington, it is the exact opposite of speed.
It really is.
It is basically built to be a meat grinder for quick decisions.
Okay, for the listener who maybe doesn't work in D.C., walk us through that. What actually is the interagency process mechanically?
Sure. So the interagency process is the bureaucratic machinery that handles foreign policy. It involves the State Department, the Defense Department, the National Security Council, the intelligence community, the Treasury.
Basically everyone.
Everyone. The list goes on forever. And the way it functions mechanically is fascinating, but it's grueling.
Right.
Say the president wants to open a new diplomatic channel with a specific country. A memo has to be drafted at the working level.
Okay.
That memo then goes into a clearance process where desk officers from every single one of those agencies get to add their edits.
Oh, man. And everyone wants to protect their turf, right?
They absolutely protect their turf, their budget, their institutional equities. And once the working level finally hashes it out, it gets elevated to a deputies committee meeting.
So the bosses of those people.
Right. Then, eventually, a principals committee meeting, which involves the actual cabinet secretaries.
Oh.
By the time a policy option actually reaches the president's desk, it has been stripped of any sharp edges. It is this lukewarm, watered-down compromise.
That offends no one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Offends no one in Washington, but often accomplishes absolutely nothing quickly in the real world.
It's like the group text from hell.
So what?
You have a group text with, 50 people, and you're all trying to pick a restaurant for dinner.
Oh, yes.
And by the time everyone weighs in on their dietary restrictions, their commute times, their budget, the restaurants are all closed, and everyone is just starving.
That is actually the perfect way to visualize it. That is the interagency process.
Yeah.
But a special envoy, that is the direct phone call.
Right. They bypass that whole group text completely.
They do. A special envoy is the president's agile instrument. They're a trusted proxy.
Yeah.
They can just hop on a plane, cut through all that bureaucratic sand in the gears, sit face-to-face with a foreign leader and just say, I am here speaking directly for the President of the United States. Let's make a deal.
Because they carry the weight of the Oval Office without the baggage of all those interagency edits.
Exactly.
Which I think brings us to the core tension here. If the world is literally on fire, and that direct phone call is our best way to put it out, why would anyone inside our own house try to cut the phone line?
Well, because diplomacy is as much about perception as it is about action. How do you think foreign adversaries observe our internal processes?
I mean, they have to study them obsessively, right?
They do. Adversarial intelligence services aren't just looking at our military hardware. They are actively mapping our bureaucratic friction.
Oh, wow. That makes sense.
If an adversarial nation sees that a U.S. diplomatic channel, like a special envoy, can be visibly throttled or delayed or humiliated by internal U.S. bureaucracy, they learn something incredibly dangerous.
What's that?
They learn that the president's chosen representative doesn't actually have the full weight of the U.S. government behind them.
Oh, man. So they learn they don't even have to beat us at the negotiating table. They just have to wait for us to defeat ourselves in the cafeteria line back home.
Exactly. They learn they can just wait us out.
Yeah.
If they see that a deputy secretary can ground the president's voice, then the president's voice loses its deterrence factor.
The agility is just gone.
It evaporates.
Yeah.
The whole psychological advantage of having a direct line to the commander-in-chief is just gone.
So if we agree that cutting this diplomatic phone line is dangerous, it really begs the question, how is a middle manager legally allowed to do it?
Yeah.
Or rather, can we even justify it? I want to understand the mechanics of this, though. How exactly does a deputy secretary ground someone? He doesn't go to the airport and physically take their passport, right? How does the bureaucracy execute this?
So the mechanism is what they call the country clearance system, specifically ECC, electronic country clearance.
Okay.
Whenever any U.S. government personnel, including an envoy, travels to a foreign country in an official capacity, the local U.S. embassy has to approve it.
Why?
Because the embassy has to allocate resources. The regional security officer, or RSO, has to arrange a motorcade or a security detail.
Oh, I see.
The embassy staff has to reserve time in the SEIF, the Sensitive Compartmented Information Facility, so the envoy can make secure calls back to Washington via SIPRNet.
So it's actually a massive logistical footprint.
Massive and expensive. If the deputy secretary sends an instruction down the chain to the chief of mission, the ambassador at that specific embassy, saying, do not authorize ECC for this envoy, the trip is dead. The envoy cannot legally enter the embassy. They get no security, no secure comms, no official transportation. They are effectively paralyzed.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate here for a minute.
Go for it.
Isn't it the deputy secretary's literal job to manage the department's budget and resources?
Yes, technically.
Right. So if an envoy is flying around the world, taking up embassy resources, demanding motorcades, staying in hotels, someone has to audit that. How do we know this isn't just standard accounting compliance? Maybe Landau is just trying to save taxpayer money.
That is a fair question regarding standard management, but we have to look at how this was executed to understand the actual intent.
Okay, how was it executed?
If it were a simple budgetary audit that is handled privately, it's between the Undersecretary for Management, the controller, and the envoy's staff.
Yeah.
It is a quiet spreadsheet discussion.
Right.
But that is not what happened here. The emails detailing these restrictions and cancellations weren't just sent privately to the envoy to sort out a budget code. Landau CC'd a wide circle of State Department personnel.
Oh, the weaponization of the CC button.
Exactly. It is performative bureaucracy. In government protocol, copying the building on a restriction like this is a deliberate signal.
He wanted people to see it.
He wasn't just handling logistics. He was actively creating a credibility problem for the envoy. He was signaling to the career Foreign Service officers, the desk officers, and the embassy staff that this presidential appointee was persona non grata.
Wow.
He was basically telling the permanent bureaucracy, I am not supporting this person, and neither should you.
Which creates a massive chilling effect across the whole department.
Huge.
I mean, no career officer is going to stick their neck out to help an envoy if the deputy secretary has publicly flagged them as a problem.
It creates needless institutional embarrassment for the president's chosen representative.
Okay.
And, it didn't just stay inside the building. This bled out into the real world.
What do you mean?
A foreign head of government had literally extended a standing invitation to this specific envoy to come and do exactly what they were appointed to do. build global partnerships.
So they were invited.
The door was wide open. The foreign leader was waiting. And yet, the State Department withheld the necessary travel support.
I look at this and I just can't buy the budget management defense.
No.
If you are told by the president to go build a partnership and the foreign leader says, come on over, and the middle manager cuts your travel budget and CCs the whole office to say you aren't allowed to go, you are being dismantled.
You are. And when you dismantle a diplomat, you create a vacuum.
Yeah.
You create a space where American presence, American influence, and American reassurance should be, but isn't. And nature abhors a vacuum, and so does geopolitics.
Someone else steps in.
Exactly. When America isn't in the room, someone else fills it. Or, perhaps worse, the situation simply deteriorates because the stabilizing force of an American envoy never arrived.
Which really brings us to the unknowable cost of all this. And this is the part that should honestly keep people awake at night.
It really should.
We have a hypothetical scenario that perfectly illustrates the stakes here for you, the listener.
Yes, and we need to establish a very strict guardrail for this segment.
Please.
We are going to pose a question here. We are not making a causal claim. We are not stating this as a historical fact. We are exploring a counterfactual to demonstrate the gravity of a grounded diplomat.
The guardrail is firmly in place. We are just asking the question.
Go ahead.
What if that foreign leader whose meeting was canceled was the Prime Minister of Albania?
Right.
What if the Albanian government was actively arranging to receive the president's envoy in the crucial weeks before the massive protests that are currently unfolding there?
It is a profound structural question. If that meeting had not been vetoed, if the ECC had been approved, if the envoy had landed, and those diplomatic talks had simply happened, could the situation in Albania look different today?
Could it?
Could early intervention, a back-channel reassurance, or a creative partnership proposal have shifted the trajectory away from chaos?
That is the butterfly effect of diplomacy, isn't it?
Absolutely.
You never know which whispered conversation over coffee or which subtle assurance in a closed-door meeting prevents a riot a month later. So if we look at Albania, did grounding this envoy cause those protests?
We cannot know, and I want to state that as firmly as possible. No one can prove that the grounding caused the protests.
Right.
Foreign affairs are vastly complex. They're driven by deep historical, economic, and social forces within the host country. It is entirely possible, even probable, that the protests would have happened exactly as they did, regardless of whether an American envoy was sitting in Tirana.
But the tragedy is that we don't know.
The honest analytical takeaway is the unknowability itself. The fact that the United States government, the president, and you as a citizen will never know if a crisis could have been averted is the exact quantifiable cost of grounding the envoy.
It's the opportunity cost of an empty chair.
You lose the opportunity to find out if diplomacy could have worked. When a deputy secretary preemptively grounds an envoy, they aren't just making a travel decision about per diem rates and hotel costs. They are making the unilateral, geopolitical decision that the United States will not try to shape events in that room.
Which is wild.
They're choosing blindness and inaction on behalf of the president without the president's consent.
Now, if this was just a one-off thing, maybe you could write it off, right?
Maybe.
You could say, okay, well, Landau and this one global partnerships envoy just hated each other. It was a terrible personality clash. They both went to different Ivy League schools and couldn't stand the sight of each other.
Sure. Interpersonal drama.
But it's not an isolated event. This is where we start seeing a deeply troubling pattern of behavior.
Right. A pattern requires more than one data point. And unfortunately, the source material provides them. Let's look at another high-profile presidential envoy, Nick Adams.
Nick Adams is another figure the president brought in to handle delicate, specialized issues, right? He has been drawing a lot of notice in the press for his work.
Yes. And based on the communications review by Tor says, Nick Adams received the exact same treatment as the Global Partnerships envoy.
Really?
We are talking about a stream of friction-filled emails emanating directly from the Deputy Secretary's office. Emails aggressively restricting his work, questioning his movements, and putting administrative hurdles in front of his mandate.
The same exact mechanism, the slow roll, the bureaucratic quicksand, the endless questioning of logistics.
Exactly the same.
Okay, so once is an anomaly, twice is a pattern. But then we get to the third example, and this one is genuinely astonishing. The Tom Barrack episode.
The Tom Barrack situation is complex. And to understand how egregious it is, we need to carefully dissect it into two distinct parts.
Okay, break it down.
Because Part A is perfectly normal administrative procedure, and Part B is where the alarm bells start ringing loudly.
Let's start with Part A, the standard procedure.
So, Tom Barrack was serving as a special envoy under a time-limited appointment. As we discussed earlier regarding the law, personal envoys are often appointed for a specific duration or a very narrow mission.
Right.
When that time is up, the appointment simply reaches its end date. That is what happened here. His initial term ended. And subsequently, the president decided to expand his mandate to cover both Syria and Iraq.
So the president looked at the work and said, your first sprint is done. Now I'm giving you a bigger portfolio. I mean, that happens all the time in government and the corporate world.
It is entirely routine. It shows the system working exactly as designed, with the president exercising his Article 2 authority to renew and expand the scope of his personal representative based on evolving geopolitical needs.
Right, there is no scandal in a term expiring.
No scandal at all. But then there is Part B, the sourced anomaly.
This is where it gets crazy.
This is attributed directly to members of the State Department's social media team who spoke with Torres S. According to these sources, when Barrack's initial term ended, Deputy Secretary Landau didn't just let the human resources paperwork process normally in the background.
What did he do?
He specifically directed the Secretary of State's official social media account to publicly announce Barrack's departure.
See, to a casual observer, a tweet saying, Tom Barrack's term has ended, thanks for your service, might sound totally benign, like a corporate LinkedIn update celebrating someone's retirement.
It sounds polite.
Right. But in the world of high-stakes diplomacy, what does a public post like that actually mean mechanically? How is it received?
We have to think about the audience here. The Secretary of State's official account isn't just for casual news. It is monitored by USINT open-source intelligence analysts at every foreign ministry, every intelligence agency, and every major news outlet on Earth.
Everyone is watching it.
They parse every single word for policy shifts. When the department goes out of its way to blast out that an envoy is gone, it is a glaring signal to the global field.
It's intentional.
It functions as a form of professional excommunication. It tells foreign leaders in Damascus, Baghdad, and elsewhere, do not take his calls. He no longer speaks for us. He has no authority.
So it's a deliberate kneecapping.
Absolutely.
It's making sure that even if the guy is still physically in the building, his credibility is reduced to ash on the global stage.
It is the ultimate burn the bridges move. But here is the incredible backfire. And it shows why trying to supersede the president's authority usually ends poorly.
Yeah.
The bureaucratic assassination attempt failed spectacularly because it ignored the fundamental legal reality we established earlier. The envoy answers to the president, not the deputy.
Because within a day, literally 24 hours later, the president formally reappoints Tom Barrack with the expanded mandate for Syria and Iraq.
Exactly. Which forces the State Department's social media team into the agonizing, humiliating position of having to publicly walk back their post from the day before.
That is so embarrassing for them.
They had to retract the excommunication because the ultimate authority, the president said, no, he is still my representative.
It is a stunning self-own by the bureaucracy, but it raises a massive flashing red light structural question. How is a deputy secretary operating so aggressively, so publicly against the president's own people?
It's a great question.
I mean, it's one thing to fight a turf war over travel budgets in the shadows of the ECC system. It is entirely another to hijack the secretary's official communications channel to fire a guy the president is actively planning to promote.
And that leads us to the most concerning structural anomaly of all. Because the effort to sideline these envoys wasn't just contained to email chains, budget codes, and social media posts.
No.
It was allegedly being pushed all the way to the Oval Office, but in a way that completely bypassed the normal chain of command.
Right. And this is attributed to sources familiar with the president's schedule. Deputy Secretary Landau has reportedly made repeated attempts to get on the president's calendar directly.
Specifically to discuss these special envoys.
And those requests keep getting denied or quietly taken off the agenda. Let me push back again, though. Why is that weird? If Landau thinks these envoys are a problem, why shouldn't he just ask for a meeting with the boss to hash it out? That seems like proactive leadership.
Because it violates the fundamental architecture of the executive branch. We have to look at what a deputy secretary actually is.
Okay.
The deputy is the principal deputy to the Secretary of State. Their job is to manage the building, implement the secretary's vision, oversee the undersecretaries, and act as the alter ego to the secretary.
Right.
If there is a massive issue regarding foreign policy personnel, even presidential appointees, the deputy takes it to the secretary. The secretary, who is a cabinet member and the president's chief foreign policy advisor, then takes it to the president.
So it's basic military or corporate hierarchy. A vice president of a regional division doesn't barge into the CEO's office to complain about a specialized consultant the CEO hired directly.
Exactly.
They go to their boss, the division president.
Seeking an audience with the president directly, going completely over the head of the Secretary of State to complain about appointees who don't even legally report to the State Department.
Oh.
It is wildly outside of his lane.
It's insubordinate.
It suggests an official who views himself not as a subordinate manager, but as an independent power center, someone trying to directly negotiate with the commander-in-chief over the scope of the president's own Article II authority.
We have to talk about the timing context here because it is crucial to understanding how this environment developed. Today is June 9, 2026. Just 2 weeks ago, on May 26, Michael Needham left the State Department.
Yes. And Michael Needham was not just a staffer. He was the counselor of the State Department. And prior to that, he served as the Secretary's chief of staff for 6 years.
A major player.
He was the Secretary's closest institutional ally, his absolute right hand in navigating the building, managing personnel, and enforcing discipline. He left to become Deputy National Security Advisor.
Now, to be absolutely clear on the timeline, the conduct we are discussing, the grounding of envoys, the friction, the canceled meetings, predates Needham's exit. This didn't just start 2 weeks ago.
The timeline is clear on that. But Needham's departure removed a major internal check on this behavior.
How so?
When the Secretary's most trusted enforcer leaves the building, the power dynamics shift instantly. A deputy who is already pushing the boundaries of his authority, already ceasing the building and trying to get on the president's schedule, suddenly has a lot more runway.
Runway to operate without immediate pushback from the secretary's inner circle.
Exactly.
Which forces me to ask a really uncomfortable question.
What's that?
Does the Secretary of State even know the full extent of what his deputy is doing? If Landau is ceasing the building to grind these envoys down, but simultaneously trying to back-channel the president directly, is the secretary being kept in the dark about how badly his own department is undermining the White House?
It is an open question, and we must pose it in good faith. We are not accusing the secretary of complicity here.
No, of course not.
In many massive bureaucracies, a principal is shielded from the granular, petty warfare conducted by their deputies. The secretary is focused on macro-level global strategy. He isn't checking the ECC approvals for every envoy.
True.
But whether he knows or not, the global perception is already calcifying.
Because the whisper networks are active. The friction is becoming public.
Very active. The media layer is a perfect example of how this internal sabotage bleeds out. The New York Times has been asking pointed questions about this exact relationship.
The tension between the deputy and the envoys.
Yes, the restricted travel, the canceled meetings.
And let me be very precise here. We are not saying the Times killed the story, suppressed it.
No, not at all. We are simply noting the reality of investigative journalism. Reporters are asking questions, gathering strings, talking to sources, but the pages remain blank. No story has appeared yet.
Right.
But the mere fact that the questions are being asked means the friction is visible from the outside. The bureaucracy is leaking.
And it's not just journalists, it's the diplomats themselves. You mentioned diplomatic circles in Paris are voicing serious concerns off the record.
Yes. Paris is a key hub of global diplomacy. And there's a murmuring in the salons and embassies there that American envoys are being quietly sidelined.
Just eased out.
Eased out of communication channels without any official public explanation. When allied diplomats, people who rely on the U.S. for security guarantees and economic stability, start noticing that the president's people are suddenly unable to travel or take meetings, they lose faith.
They lose faith in the reliability of American commitment.
They wonder who's actually running the show in Washington.
So we have a highly competent, incredibly credentialed Deputy Secretary of State who is risking major internal blowback, stepping wildly out of his lane, alienating the president's team, and damaging global credibility.
Yes.
Why? Why would anyone take on that much risk to ground a few diplomats?
That is the pivotal, central question of this entire scenario. And to even begin exploring it, we have to look at the final layer of this puzzle, the financial layer, the Office of Government Ethics disclosures.
Okay, listener, I need you to lean in because we are going to frame this section with surgical care. We are looking strictly, and I mean strictly, at Christopher Landau's own Office of Government Ethics Form 278E and related public records.
Exactly. No wild leaps, no assertions of criminality, no conspiracy theories, just the paper trail that he himself generated and submitted to the government.
Before we look at the paper, we need to acknowledge who generated it. Christopher Landau is not some bumbling bureaucrat who accidentally hit reply all and doesn't understand the rules.
Hardly.
He is a highly capable, fiercely intelligent legal mind. Harvard College, Harvard Law. He clerked for 2 Supreme Court justices, Antonin Scalia and Clarence Thomas. He had a massive, successful appellate practice. He served as the U.S. ambassador to Mexico from 2019 to 2021.
Which is vital context. This isn't about incompetence or a misunderstanding of protocol. A man with that resume understands the precise, mechanical impact of every email, every CC, every canceled ECC approval, and every public calendar request.
It's all calculated.
Highly calculated. Which makes the contents of his OGE 278 disclosure so fascinating, because they reveal a deep, complex web of financial and professional entanglements that intersect directly with U.S. foreign policy.
Let's break down the OGE form. If you're a deputy secretary making decisions about global diplomacy, you have to disclose your financial ties to ensure you aren't conflicted. What exactly is on this form?
We have to look at the timeline and the entities. First, there is a $15,000 honorarium from Canacero.
Wait, what is Canacero?
Canacero is Mexico's National Steel Industry Trade Association. It is a powerful lobbying and industry group.
Okay.
And that $15,000 was paid to him in March 2024, less than a year before his nomination to be deputy secretary.
It's an interesting data point, but people give speeches and get honorariums. What else is tying him to the region?
He has a continuing advisory board seat on the Wilson Center's Mexico Institute, a position he has held since January 2021, immediately after stepping down as ambassador.
That keeps him connected.
It keeps him deeply tethered to the policy and business circles, heavily focused on U.S.-Mexico relations.
Then there is the legal side. There is a retained interest in an Ellis George LLP contingency case, and the form values this between $5 million and $25 million.
And crucially, the client in that massive contingency case is unnamed.
Which is a huge bracket. $5 to $25 million is life-changing money, even for a successful lawyer. But he also held significant corporate equity, right?
Yes. He held equity in FEMSA.
What's that?
FEMSA is a behemoth. It is a major Mexican beverage and retail conglomerate. They bottle Coca-Cola for the region. They run the massive OXXO convenience store chain.
Huge company.
And Landau only divested from these holdings via a 278T filing just last month, in May 2025.
Just so everyone is clear on the mechanics, what is the difference between the 278E and the 278T?
The 278E is the primary comprehensive disclosure you file when entering government or annually. The 278T is a periodic transaction report.
Oh, I see.
You file it when you buy, sell, or exchange a specific asset. So the 278T shows he finally divested that FEMSA stock well into his tenure.
And geopolitically, we have to look at the atmosphere. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum and the ruling Morena government have been notably warm and publicly praising toward his appointment and his actions.
Which, again, is not inherently a crime. You want U.S. diplomats to have good, functional relationships with foreign leaders.
Of course you do. But here is the kicker. Here is the thing that stops the music and makes all of these data points suddenly look very different.
What is it?
His ethics agreement compliance certification is missing from the OGE public index.
Wow. And it isn't just a few days late because of administrative backlog. It is roughly a year past its expected due date.
What exactly is that document? Why does it matter so much?
When you enter government with a complex financial portfolio, you sign an ethics agreement. You promise the Office of Government Ethics, I will sell this stock, I will step down from this board, I will recuse myself from these specific policy areas to avoid a conflict of interest.
You make a promise.
Right. The compliance certification is the follow-up document where you prove to the government and the public that you actually did what you promised.
So for a guy who clerked for the Supreme Court, a guy who understands legal compliance better than almost anyone in Washington, to just not have this form on file a year later.
Let's analyze this carefully. None of the items you just listed, the honorarium, the board seat, the equity, the contingency case, are illegal on their face.
Right.
High-level appointees often come from lucrative private sector careers with complex portfolios. You don't want a government run exclusively by people who have never held a job in the private sector.
Sure, you don't get to that level of influence by keeping all your money in a mattress and never talking to an industry group.
But context is everything. You have an official who is deeply financially and professionally woven into the fabric of a specific foreign country, Mexico.
Right.
This is happening amid incredibly sensitive, high-stakes bilateral issues. We are talking about the renegotiation of the USMCA trade deal.
Massive deal.
We are talking about ongoing volatile steel tariffs disputes. Remember the Canacero honorarium. We're talking about border security and massive supply chain shifts.
And that same official who has all these regional entanglements and a missing ethics compliance form is simultaneously making highly unusual, aggressive moves to ground the president's independent diplomats.
Yes.
Diplomats who are explicitly tasked with building global partnerships and might just stumble into those exact same issue areas.
It demands scrutiny. When you combine the aggressiveness of the unauthorized vetoes, the canceled meetings, the CC emails, the social media excommunications, with the depth of the regional financial entanglements, and top it off with the missing ethics certification, you cannot just look away. It ceases to be a story about bureaucratic friction and becomes a story about structural integrity.
It forces me to ask the hard, provocative question. Whose interests are being served here?
Exactly.
If the President of the United States says go left, and the deputy uses his administrative power to stop the president's guy from going left, who benefits from that delay? Who benefits from the American envoy never arriving at the meeting?
And we must immediately clarify, we cannot answer that question definitively.
No.
We do not know Christopher Landau's internal motivations. We do not know the identity of the unnamed contingency client.
Right.
But the fact that the question exists and the fact that his own missing paperwork prevents the public from verifying his ethical compliance makes the silence deafening.
It's the opacity that breeds the suspicion. If you are doing everything by the book, file a form. If you are grounding envoys for legitimate logistical reasons, don't try to backchannel the president about it, and don't hijack the secretary's Twitter account.
Exactly. The behavior does not match the profile of a standard budget audit. And this brings us to the core thesis of our deep dive.
Yes, the remedy.
We have diagnosed the problem. We have looked at the constitutional law, the bureaucratic mechanics, the pattern of behavior, and the financial layer. Now we need to discuss the structural remedy.
Because this isn't just about Christopher Landau.
No, it is about the system that allows a Christopher Landau to operate this way.
Let's synthesize this. We have spent this deep dive looking at a glaring flaw in the matrix. The capability of a single subcabinet official to throttle, embarrass, and sideline the president's direct diplomatic channels is a massive structural vulnerability.
It is.
It shouldn't be physically or bureaucratically possible for a middle manager to lock the CEO's fixer out of the building.
It is a profound design flaw that has been ruthlessly exploited. Whatever the motive in any specific case, the capability itself is the danger. An official who can quietly deny an ECC approval holds a veto power the Constitution never intended them to have. They are usurping the president's Article 2 authority through administrative sabotage.
So how do we fix it? How does the president take back control of his own foreign policy apparatus?
The remedy requires a shift in how the presidency views its own power and its own personnel. The president should not ration his special envoys.
He shouldn't.
He should multiply them.
I love this idea. Unpack that mechanically. How does that solve the ECC choke point?
Right now, envoys are treated as rare, delicate instruments. The president appoints a handful of them for very specific missions. But if the permanent bureaucracy is hostile to them, relying on just a few makes them easy targets.
Like shooting fish in a barrel.
Exactly. A determined deputy secretary can track 3 or 4 envoys and throw sand in their gears. But the president needs to expand the envoy corps into a ready reserve.
Like the military reserves. A deep bench of specialists ready to deploy at a moment's notice.
A disciplined, agile group of loyalists who can be activated across many simultaneous lines of effort. 50 envoys, 100 envoys.
Saturation.
Saturation. They carry one agenda, the elected agenda of the president, without being softened by the permanent bureaucracy's need to protect its own equities.
If you flood the zone, the bureaucracy's immune system gets overwhelmed. A middle manager can't possibly cancel all their flights, withhold all their motorcades, and CC the whole building on 100 different reprimands without completely breaking the system out in the open.
It restores presidential capacity. It ensures that the people negotiating on behalf of the United States are loyal to the policies the American people voted for, not the institutional, slow-moving preferences of the State Department.
It forces their hand.
It forces the bureaucracy to either facilitate the president's agenda or publicly refuse to do their jobs.
And I want to bring in a perspective tied directly to the Torsey's source material that kicked off this whole deep dive, because there is a profound redirect here regarding the Deputy Secretary's time and energy. If a senior official like Christopher Landau is going to spend all this incredible energy, all these late nights, all these emails playing internal police, it should be aimed in the right direction.
It is a fundamental question of resource allocation and focus.
Mm-hmm.
The Deputy Secretary has an incredibly difficult, demanding job. Why spend it fighting the White House?
Right. Aim that internal police force a genuine subversion within the department. Aim it at the career bureaucrats who leak sensitive negotiation details to the press to kill a deal they don't like.
Yes.
Aim it at the people who actively slow-roll congressional mandates or mismanage massive aid budgets. Do not aim it at the president's own hand-picked team. It's like a white blood cell attacking the heart instead of the infection.
And that leads to the final, unavoidable conclusion regarding Christopher Landau's conduct. Christopher Landau is not the Secretary of State.
He is not.
But he is behaving as though he were. He is acting with the unilateral, unchecked confidence of a principal rather than a deputy. He is making sovereign decisions about who represents America abroad. And until the actual Secretary of State or the President himself steps in and stops it, you, the listener, and the country pay the price.
We pay in reach. We pay in credibility on the global stage. And most importantly, we pay in time. In a world with overlapping crises, active conflicts, and supply chain meltdowns, time is the one asset we cannot print more of.
Well said. Every day an envoy sits grounded on the tarmac is a day an adversary is advancing their agenda unchecked.
So let's wrap up this journey we've been on. We started by looking at the constitutional origins of the special envoy. We looked at George Washington dispatching Gouverneur Morris to London,
establishing the absolute Article 2 right of the president to have a direct voice in the world, unhindered by the slow-moving legislative or bureaucratic processes.
And we tracked how that constitutional right is currently colliding with a bureaucratic wall. We examined the mechanics of the grounded flights, the canceled ECC embassy approvals, the denied motorcades,
and the weaponized CC emails meant to humiliate the president's representatives.
We looked at the pattern. It wasn't just one guy. We saw Nick Adams facing the exact same administrative friction. We saw Tom Barrett getting publicly excommunicated on social media by the deputy's order, only to be resurrected by the president the very next day.
We examined the bizarre hierarchy jumps. A deputy trying to bypass his boss, the Secretary of State, to complain directly to the president.
And we layered all of that documented conduct over the deeply complex, unresolved financial disclosures. The missing OG compliance forms, the Canastro honorarium, the FEMSA stock, and the unnamed contingency client.
It all paints a picture of an unauthorized veto.
A system where the middle manager locked the CEO's fixer out of the building and refused to show the auditors his own paperwork. And I want to leave you with a signature quote from Tor that I think encapsulates this entire deep dive perfectly.
Let's hear it.
It's not the story they tell you that is important. It's what they omit.
The omitted ethics compliance forms, the omitted meetings in Albania, the omitted logistical support for the envoys. That is where the real story lives. The power of the bureaucracy is often found in what it refuses to do.
And before we go, I want to leave you, the listener, with one final provocative thought to chew on, something we didn't even touch on today, but that builds directly on everything we've learned about this structural vulnerability.
Okay.
We have spent this whole time talking about internal sabotage, a deputy secretary grinding axes against the White House. But look at the mechanics. If our own internal bureaucracy can be manipulated this easily to freeze the president's foreign policy,
yes.
If all it takes is a deputy secretary abusing the ECC travel approval system to blindfold the commander-in-chief, how long until a foreign intelligence service realizes they don't even need to defeat us at the negotiating table?
That is a deeply chilling thought.
Yeah.
They don't need a better military or a stronger economy. They just need to understand our HR systems.
Exactly. How long until an adversary realizes they simply need to exploit our own middle management rules, hack our internal friction, and use our own budget audits to keep our best negotiators grounded on the tarmac indefinitely?
Wow.
If we can do this to ourselves, if a single middle manager can cut the diplomatic phone line, imagine what a sophisticated enemy could do with the exact same playbook.
The United States is managing a massive, expanding threat surface. Overlapping crises and active conflicts require simultaneous negotiations across dozens of governments. In this environment, the president cannot wait on the slow churn of interagency bureaucracy. To bridge this gap, the White House uses a specific, agile instrument, the Special Envoy. These envoys bypass traditional red tape, allowing the president to place a trusted representative in a room with a foreign leader instantly to deliver his direct instructions. Foreign adversaries are not the ones cutting these lines of communication. Instead, these diplomatic channels are being grounded by officials within the president's own State Department. This raises a foundational question. How is it structurally possible for a subcabinet official to sever the commander-in-chief's direct voice to the world? Under federal law, statutory envoys fill positions created by Congress and usually require Senate confirmation to exercise legal authority. But personal envoys operate under Article 2 of the Constitution. They carry the president's voice, requiring no Senate confirmation. Because they hold no independent authority, they serve at the pleasure of the president alone. No official below him has legal standing to supervise them. The Deputy Secretary of State is the principal deputy to the secretary, not a supervisor for the president's personal representatives. Despite this, Deputy Secretary Christopher Landau has been actively restricting the travel and canceling the international meetings of these personal envoys. By grounding an Article 2 envoy, a deputy is exercising a supervisory role that does not exist in the law. It is an unauthorized veto. Communications reviewed by Tory says show the deputy confirmed in writing that he instructed U.S. embassies to cancel meetings for an envoy focused on global partnerships. Despite a standing invitation from a foreign head of government, the department withheld the necessary travel support. Consider the stakes. What if that foreign leader was the Prime Minister of Albania, and the canceled talks were scheduled just weeks before the massive protests now unfolding there? We cannot prove a grounded envoy would have changed the outcome in Albania, but the cost of this obstruction is that the president and the country will never know. This behavior repeats across different portfolios. Envoy Nick Adams encountered the same resistance, facing a stream of emails from the deputy's office that restricted his ability to move and conduct diplomacy. The treatment of Tom Barrack was even more irregular. While his initial term ended as scheduled, the manner in which it was publicized suggests a specific intent. The deputy directed the department to publicly announce Barrack's departure on social media, a move that signaled a professional excommunication. It was a signal that failed. The president immediately reappointed Barrack with a broader mandate, forcing the department to walk back the announcement. Motives for this level of bureaucratic friction remain unstated, but Christopher Landau's mandatory financial disclosures highlight significant external ties. Landau's Form 278E shows a $15,000 honorarium from Mexico's National Steel Association and a retained interest in a contingency case valued between $5 and $25 million. Furthermore, his ethics agreement compliance certification is missing from the public record, now a year past its due date. He also maintains a seat on the advisory board for the Wilson Center's Mexico Institute, a role he kept while helping set U.S. policy toward that same country. These ties have not gone unnoticed. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum and her government have been notably public in their praise of his appointment. These financial entanglements do not prove a corrupt motive. However, when an official with these specific external interests takes the unusual step of grounding the president's personal envoys, it forces a difficult question. Whose interests are being served? Without a completed ethics certification, that question remains unanswered. When a diplomatic channel can be quietly throttled from within, adversaries learn they can simply wait out the president's agenda. They see the dysfunction, and they use it to their advantage. The remedy is to expand the envoy corps, creating a ready reserve of loyal representatives that can move faster than the bureaucracy. This type of internal friction has likely increased since the departure of Michael Needham, a key institutional ally of the secretary, who previously served as a check on the building's internal politics. Christopher Landau is acting with the authority of the president. Until the chain of command is restored, the United States continues to lose its most valuable assets: reach, credibility, and time.
So, the author begins by setting the stage. And the stage they describe is one of just unprecedented global instability. They argue that the United States is currently at war, but it's not, it's not a traditional kinetic war with front lines and trenches.
Oh, right, it's more invisible than that.
Exactly. The author claims we are facing what they call the widest threat surface of our lifetime.
Let's break that term down, because threat surface, that sounds like cybersecurity jargon to me.
It is, yeah.
Right, so if I'm looking at my laptop, my threat surface is like my email inbox where I might get a phishing link, or my unprotected Wi-Fi network, or just outdated software. But how does the author apply that concept to global diplomacy?
Well, right now, American diplomacy is not just dealing with one isolated crisis in one single region. In cybersecurity, a threat surface refers to all the different points where an adversary can attempt to enter or attack a system.
Okay, I see where this is going.
The author applies this exact concept to the geopolitical map. We have overlapping crises, hostile non-state actors looking for opportunities, financial warfare, cyber intrusions.
It's a lot.
It's massive. And there's a huge list of highly delicate negotiations running in parallel all over the globe. The State Department has to manage relationships in the Middle East, counterintelligence in Eastern Europe, trade routes in the South China Sea, and economic partnerships in South America, all simultaneously.
In that kind of environment, I mean, agility is not just a luxury, it's survival.
Absolutely.
The ability of the president to take a trusted, brilliant negotiator, completely bypass the massive bureaucracy of the State Department, and put them in a room with a foreign leader on, like, 24 hours notice that can literally be the difference between a regional dispute being contained and a problem metastasizing into a global catastrophe.
And the author argues that this exact agility, right, the president's most flexible diplomatic instrument, it is being actively disabled from within.
By who, though?
Well, specifically, the author points the finger at a subcabinet official, the Deputy Secretary of State.
Deputy Secretary.
The dispatch claims that this specific official is intentionally grounding the president's special envoys, revoking their travel, and just unilaterally canceling their meetings.
Okay, wait. Let me push back on how we are framing this for a second, because we need to get the mechanics right. The initial thought I had, and I'm sure a lot of listeners might have this too, is about the standard chain of command.
Sure, the organizational chart.
Right. So if I look at the State Department as this massive bureaucratic city bus, the Deputy Secretary of State is essentially the supervisor of the bus depot.
Okay, I followed the analogy.
So special envoys are out there conducting diplomacy. If the depot supervisor tells a driver to park the bus, why is the author calling this an unauthorized veto? Doesn't the Deputy Secretary have the right to manage the people working under the State Department's umbrella?
See, the author anticipates that exact assumption. To understand why the city bus analogy fails in this specific legal context, we have to look at the actual DNA of a special envoy.
Okay, so it's not a city bus.
No, it's not a city bus versus the depot supervisor. A better analogy, based on the text, is that the president has hired an independent Uber to get an urgent package across town because the city bus is too slow.
Oh, I like that.
Right. And the deputy secretary is the city bus driver who is illegally throwing spike strips onto the road to stop the Uber, simply because he believes everyone should be forced to take the bus.
Oh, wow. Okay, that changes the entire power dynamic. If the envoy is the independent Uber, then the State Department has no jurisdiction over them whatsoever.
Exactly. But getting back to the core accusation, the author states flat out that no one beneath the president hires a personal envoy, and absolutely no one beneath the president fires them.
Right. They serve entirely at the pleasure of the commander-in-chief. So if we apply this constitutional reality to the Deputy Secretary's actions, this is not a case of micromanagement.
No, the author classifies it as fundamentally illegitimate. If the envoy answers only to the president, then the Deputy Secretary of State has zero supervisory authority over them.
None.
None whatsoever. When the deputy cancels an envoy's travel, blocks their budget, or tells an embassy not to support them, this is not institutional oversight. It is an unauthorized veto over the president's constitutional Article 2 powers.
Wow.
Yeah, the deputy is effectively stepping into the shoes of the commander-in-chief and deciding which of the president's personal tools are allowed to function and which are left to rust.
Here is where it gets really interesting, because we have established the structural argument, right? We have defined the boundary lines of constitutional authority, but abstract legal theory only goes so far.
You need receipts.
Exactly. And the dispatch provides concrete receipts detailing highly specific case studies of how this throttling allegedly plays out in the real world. I want to look at the first example the author provides, the case of Tom Barrack.
Yeah, the Tom Barrack case study is illuminating because it showcases the mundane mechanics of the envoy system, just violently colliding with highly irregular public interference from the State Department.
Right. So, according to the dispatch, Barrack was serving as a presidential envoy with a time-limited appointment.
A time-limited appointment just means it has a built-in expiration date.
Which sounds like a fairly standard government contract, no?
It is entirely standard. When that date arrived, his term naturally expired. As the author notes, this happens constantly in Washington. People's temporary appointments end, and they quietly transition out.
Right, no fuss.
But the State Department's response was anything but quiet. The author claims, citing accounts from members of the State Department's own social media team, that the Deputy Secretary directed the official Secretary of State's social media account to publicly broadcast that Barrack's appointment had ended.
Let's contextualize how strange that is. Imagine you are working at a high-level consulting firm on, like, a 6-month contract. Your contract finishes on a Friday. Usually, your access badge simply turns off, you say goodbye to your team, and you leave.
Right, maybe a small farewell lunch.
Exactly. But instead of that, the vice president of the entire firm forces the HR department to send out a massive company-wide email blast, specifically alerting every single employee that you are no longer employed there.
It's bizarre.
That is not standard offboarding. That is a targeted humiliation. Why would a subcabinet official orchestrate that?
Well, the author provides a precise interpretation of that motive, calling it a quiet excommunication.
A quiet excommunication.
Yeah. In the highly nuanced, perception-driven world of international diplomacy, a public signal like that from the very top of the State Department is absolutely devastating to a person's credibility.
Oh, I see.
It broadcasts a message to every foreign government, every ambassador, and every intelligence agency in the professional diplomatic world. This individual is finished. He does not speak for the United States. Do not take his calls. Do not negotiate with him.
They're just burning his diplomatic utility to the ground on his way out the door. But to what end?
To completely sever his ability to function in the region. But, and this is where it gets crazy, the author highlights how spectacularly this specific attempt backfired.
What happened?
The very next day, the president, who, remember, holds the sole constitutional authority over personal envoys, turned around and reappointed Tom Barrack.
You're kidding.
And the president did not just reinstate him, he expanded Barrack's mandate to cover both Syria and Iraq.
To average citizens, this just sounds like a high-level, petty HR dispute. But we need to anchor the stakes here. What happens to the average American, or to American interests abroad, when a diplomat assigned to incredibly volatile regions like Syria and Iraq gets publicly undermined by his own State Department?
The consequences are immediate, and they are severe. Syria and Iraq are environments where multiple adversarial nations, proxy militias, and terrorist organizations are constantly testing American resolve.
It's a tinderbox.
Exactly. So if an envoy walks into a negotiation with local leaders in Iraq, and those leaders have just seen the U.S. State Department publicly disavow him the day before, the envoy has zero leverage.
Why would they listen to him?
They wouldn't. The foreign leaders will simply refuse to make deals, knowing the American government is internally divided. The author uses this incident to demonstrate that the president clearly wanted Barrack in play, managing these vital regions, while the bureaucracy was actively trying to signal to the world that he was useless.
And it forced the State Department social media team to execute a humiliating public walkback, right? Clarifying their post from the day before.
Which is just a terrible look for everyone involved.
So, the Barrack incident is loud and public. But the author pivots from that explosive public friction to a scenario that is much quieter and honestly, arguably far more dangerous because of its subtlety. The dispatch introduces a hypothetical scenario revolving around Albania.
Yes, the Albania narrative shifts the focus from public humiliation to institutional paralysis. The author states they reviewed communications showing an envoy who had a standing invitation for an official visit from a foreign head of government.
And the text implies heavily that this leader was the Prime Minister of Albania.
It does. And the timing of this invitation is the critical detail here.
Right, because this was in the weeks just prior to massive destabilizing protests unfolding in Albania.
Exactly. And the fundamental purpose of an envoy is to build and maintain these exact kinds of global partnerships, right? To be present when a foreign ally reaches out with an open hand, especially before crisis hits.
But the author claims the State Department systematically withheld the travel approvals, the security clearances, and the logistical support required to actually make the trip happen. The envoy was effectively grounded on the tarmac by a subcabinet officer at home.
And then the author asks what feels like an incredibly heavy, almost philosophical question.
Right.
They ask, if the envoy had not been grounded, if the prime minister had not been left feeling slighted and abandoned by the United States, could the situation in Albania today look different? Could the unrest and protests have been mitigated by an American diplomatic presence?
You know, when I read that, my immediate reaction was skepticism.
Really? How so?
Well, is it not a massive leap of logic to suggest that one single canceled meeting with an American envoy could have altered the entire course of a sovereign nation's domestic protests? I mean, the butterfly effect is a compelling concept in science fiction, but applying it to global geopolitics feels like a stretch.
And the author explicitly anticipates that exact skepticism. They state clearly in the text, I want to be clear, it is a question, not a claim.
Okay, that's a fair distinction.
The author readily admits that nobody possesses a crystal ball. Nobody can know for sure if that meeting would have single-handedly changed the course of Albanian history. But the author's argument operates on a deeper level. The point is not that the envoy possessed some magical silver bullet solution to the Albanian crisis.
Then what is the actual point of highlighting the canceled trip?
The point is the cost of the omission. The author writes, the fact that we will never know the answer is itself the cost of what was done.
Oh, wow.
By grounding the envoy, the deputy secretary ensured that the United States was not even in the room. We surrendered the opportunity to exert influence. We left a strategic partner hanging at a critical moment of vulnerability.
You know, the cost of omission is a terrifying concept when applied to national security. Think about how the butterfly effect works in our personal relationships. If you know a friend is going through a terrible crisis, and you deliberately avoid having a difficult conversation with them, the damage isn't caused by something you did. The damage is caused by your absence. The relationship deteriorates because you weren't in the room when it mattered. The author is taking that deeply human dynamic and applying it to international alliances.
That's a great way to put it. The damage caused by throttling diplomacy is rarely a dramatic explosion. It is almost always the quiet, unnoticed absence of an intervention that might have stabilized a teetering situation. It is a cost to the roads not taken.
And to demonstrate that Albania and Tom Barrack were not simply, isolated errors in judgment, the source introduces a third name to establish a definitive pattern, Nick Adams.
Right, Nick Adams. The text mentions that he is another high-profile presidential envoy whose strong work was actually drawing positive notice in the press.
But while he was receiving public accolades behind the scenes, the author claims he was facing the exact same mechanism of constraint.
Yes, the dispatch references a stream of emails emanating directly from the Deputy Secretary's office, designed to micromanage, restrict, and suffocate his operations.
It's that old rule of bureaucratic behavior, right? One instance might be friction. 2 instances are a pattern. 3 instances are a policy.
Exactly. 3 instances means it's a structural feature, not a bug.
So we have established the pattern of behavior. We have walked through the constitutional argument that this behavior is legally unauthorized. The obvious, glaring question that emerges from all of this is, how on earth is this subcabinet official getting away with it?
Right, where's the oversight?
Exactly. Where are the institutional checks and balances inside the State Department? If the guy in the mailroom unplugs the CEO's red phone, doesn't the IT department notice? Doesn't the head of security step in?
Well, the author describes the internal dynamics of the State Department as a literal bureaucratic battlefield. They meticulously map out the structure of the department, the strategic staffing vacuums, and even the complicity of the mainstream media to explain exactly how this sabotage is permitted to thrive in the dark.
The detail about calendar control was particularly striking to me. The source reveals that the deputy secretary has repeatedly attempted to secure time on the president's personal schedule to discuss the special envoys. But his requests keep getting rejected or bumped off the agenda?
Because calendar control is the ultimate currency of power in Washington. Think about the hierarchical chain of command here. The deputy secretary is the principal deputy to the Secretary of State. His direct boss is the secretary.
Right.
But according to the dispatch, the deputy is aggressively trying to lobby the president directly, entirely bypassing his own superior. And the subject of this lobbying effort, appointees, the special envoys, who do not even legally report to the State Department in the first place.
To put that in corporate terms, it is like the vice president of marketing going directly to the CEO of the company to complain about the actions of the company's independent external legal counsel.
Exactly.
It is completely outside of their lane, and it completely undermines their own boss.
And the author observes this, saying, what he intends to say in a meeting he keeps being bumped from, I cannot tell you. That he keeps seeking it tells you how far outside his role he believes he can reach.
The sheer audacity.
Yeah, the audacity of persistently trying to secure that meeting. Despite being repeatedly rebuffed by the White House scheduling apparatus, it indicates a deeply entrenched belief that he possesses the standing to interfere with the president's personal diplomatic channels.
But if the deputy is behaving this aggressively, the Secretary of State must be aware of what his own second-in-command is doing. How could he not know?
The author tackles that question head-on, stating simply, I am not convinced he does.
Wait, really?
Really? And to explain how a cabinet secretary could be kept in the dark by his own deputy, the author points to a highly specific, pivotal structural shift. On May 26th, a man named Michael Needham exited the State Department.
Okay, let's look at that. The dispatch notes that Needham served as the Secretary's chief of staff for 6 years and subsequently as counselor of the State Department before leaving to become the Deputy National Security Advisor.
Right. And the author characterizes Needham as the Secretary's closest institutional ally inside that building, and deliberately refers to him as a Rubio loyal check.
A loyal check? What is the mechanical function of a loyal check in a bureaucracy of that size?
Well, in the ecosystem of a massive government department, a cabinet secretary cannot possibly monitor every single email, every travel voucher, and every directive issued by their subordinates.
It's just too much volume.
Way too much. They rely entirely on incredibly loyal, ruthless deputies, typically a chief of staff, to act as their eyes and ears. The chief of staff's job is to ensure the secretary's intent is being executed flawlessly, and more importantly, to aggressively squash any unauthorized freelancing by ambitious subordinates.
So they're the enforcer.
Exactly. The author implies that Michael Needham functioned as the department's immune system. He was the guardrail keeping the deputy secretary's actions somewhat contained, ensuring the secretary was not completely blindsided by internal maneuvering.
But when Needham left the building on May 26th, that critical guardrail vanished. The immune system was compromised.
And the author posits that Needham's exit created a massive power vacuum, allowing the deputy's covert campaign against the envoys to accelerate rapidly without the secretary's full granular knowledge.
So if the secretary is theoretically in the dark due to staffing changes, and the president is insulated by layers of scheduling bureaucracy that bump meetings off the calendar, who is left to hold the system accountable? Usually we rely on the press for that.
We do. And the author brings up the media, specifically singling out the New York Times.
The paragraph detailing the media's involvement is honestly, arguably the most chilling indictment of institutional failure in the entire dispatch.
It really is.
The author claims, and states it is worth recording plainly, that the New York Times has been actively investigating this exact dynamic. Their reporters have been asking pointed questions about the strained relationship between the deputy and the special envoys, about the inexplicably restricted travel, and about the canceled diplomatic meetings.
And the text notes that this is not a secret tightly held in Washington. There are whispers moving through diplomatic circles in Paris.
In Paris.
Yeah. The professional diplomatic community globally is aware that the president's envoys are being sidelined. The access and support they require to function are just being left to wither on the vine.
But the revelation here is the lack of publication.
Right.
The author states that the reporting has been underway, the questions have been asked, but the story has not appeared. The New York Times has not run the piece. And then the author delivers this absolute masterclass in understatement. I will let the silence speak for itself.
I will let the silence speak for itself. It's a powerful line.
It ties directly back to our earlier discussion about the cost of omission. The power of the press is not always found in the explosive hit piece that dominates the front page. Sometimes the ultimate power is exercised through the explosive story that is quietly suffocated before it ever sees the light of day.
Absolutely.
How do stories get killed in Washington? It forces us to ask, who benefits from this specific silence? Who benefits when the American public remains entirely unaware that the president's direct diplomatic lines are being systematically severed?
And identifying who benefits provides the perfect logical transition to the next layer of the author's argument.
Let's go there.
If this is not simply a random turf war fueled by ego, if this deputy secretary is willing to go to such extraordinary lengths by passing his boss, risking profound public embarrassment with a Barrack tweet, exploiting staffing vacuums, and overriding constitutional norms to ground these envoys, we must examine his underlying motivation.
Why is he so desperate to keep these diplomatic channels closed?
The dispatch argues that the answer lies in the deputy's own professional background.
And this is the moment in the dispatch where the author finally names the official they have been analyzing, Christopher Landau.
Christopher Landau.
The author delivers a scathing assessment. Christopher Landau is not the Secretary of State. He is behaving as though he were. The text then suggests that to understand his behavior, we need to follow the financial entanglements, specifically detailing Landau's extensive connections to Mexico.
Right, and the author relies purely on the public record here, utilizing Landau's own financial disclosures to construct a profile of an official deeply, intricately woven into the economic fabric of a foreign nation. A nation over which he now exercises massive policy influence.
The text meticulously lists 4 specific concerning entanglements. Let's go through them. First, they highlight a $15,000 honorarium paid to Landau by Mexico's National Steel Trade Association.
And the timing of that payment is noted as being less than a year prior to his official nomination.
Right. Second, the text points out his continuing seat on an advisory board specifically focused on Mexico policy. Third, and perhaps most complex, is his retention of a multi-million-dollar interest in an ongoing litigation case where his specific client has not been publicly identified.
I mean, a multi-million-dollar financial interest attached to an unnamed client is the kind of detail that triggers massive red flags in literally any corporate compliance department.
Exactly. Which brings us to the 4th point, perhaps the most alarming from a purely bureaucratic, good governance standpoint. The author claims that at the time the dispatch was written, Landau's legally required ethics compliance certification was nearly a year past its due date in the public record.
A year past due.
Yeah. But I need to pause the analysis here and just, play devil's advocate for a second, because the author themselves includes a crucial caveat in the text.
Right, they do.
They admit none of this is illegal on its face. People in Washington serve on advisory boards all the time. High-powered lawyers frequently maintain massive ongoing litigation interests when they enter public service. Think tanks and trade associations give paid speeches constantly.
It's the revolving door.
Right. So are we simply looking at standard Washington swamp behavior? Is the author just throwing financial mud against the wall to make Landau look corrupt? Or does this actually have a direct mechanical relevance to the fact that presidential envoys are sitting on the tarmac with canceled tickets?
It is essential to analyze the mechanism of influence here. The author is not alleging some cartoonish scenario where a $15,000 honorarium functions as a direct cash bribe to cancel an envoy's flight.
Right, that's too simple.
They are constructing a much more sophisticated argument about conflicts of interest, the nature of access, and the necessity of scrutiny. The author's logic operates like this. When a high-level official is heavily financially, professionally, and socially integrated into a specific foreign country, any unusual or unprecedented moves they make regarding that country, or foreign policy in general, invite intense, skeptical scrutiny.
And as the author flatly states, grounding the president's own envoys is an unusual move.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If Landau were simply executing standard, mundane, day-to-day management of the State Department, his past financial ties to Mexican steel associations and advisory boards might just be dismissed as the standard background noise of a Washington career.
Sure.
But because he is executing unprecedented, legally questionable actions to actively disable the president's independent diplomatic channels, those financial ties suddenly take on a totally different context. The author is fundamentally asking, when you possess deep, enduring ties to foreign industries, and you simultaneously utilize your government position to blind the president's independent eyes and ears on the global stage, whose interests are being served?
Whose interests are being served? That single question reframes the entire narrative.
It really does.
It transforms what looks like bureaucratic sabotage from just, an accident of incompetence into a potential mechanism of deliberate control. We have diagnosed a massive systemic problem. We have looked at the unauthorized vetoes, the constitutional overreach, the potential conflicts of interest, and the media silence.
So what's the fix?
Exactly. What does the author suggest the commander-in-chief should actually do to fix it? Because if the geopolitical house is on fire, how do we put it out?
The author's proposed solution is fascinating precisely because it completely rejects a defensive posture. They explicitly declare the remedy here is not defensive.
So no sternly worded memos.
No, they do not advise the president to issue a memo clarifying the organizational chart or to mildly reprimand the deputy secretary. The author insists the president must aggressively lean into the exact instrument that is currently under attack.
So the solution is to radically expand the envoy program.
Yes. The text argues that the president simply cannot conduct the necessary high-velocity foreign policy required in the modern era with just a handful of personal representatives. We have to return to the concept of the massive threat surface we discussed at the beginning.
The overlapping crises, the parallel negotiations across multiple continents, the financial and cyber warfare.
Because that threat surface is so expansive, and it's evolving much faster than the traditional lumbering interagency process can possibly absorb, the president requires what the author terms a ready reserve.
Ready reserve,
yeah. This would be a small, highly disciplined, fiercely loyal core of envoys who can be activated across several different lines of effort simultaneously, completely bypassing the State Department's friction.
And the author zeroes in on exactly why these independent envoys are so much more effective than the permanent bureaucracy. They observe that envoys carry one agenda and only one agenda: the president's.
Right.
They do not arrive at a negotiation table with equities to protect or careers to nurse inside the permanent bureaucracy.
And that observation leads directly to one of the most evocative, perfectly articulated phrases in the entire dispatch. The author criticizes the bureaucrat's habit of sanding down a hard instruction until it is soft enough to survive clearance.
Sanding down a hard instruction. Let's explore how that clearance process actually works in practice, because anyone who has ever worked at a stubborn, entrenched, massive corporation knows exactly what that feels like.
Oh, absolutely.
You come into a meeting with a bold new idea, a sharp, disruptive initiative designed to solve a major problem. By the time that idea goes through middle management review, legal compliance, and 3 different stakeholder committees, all the sharp edges have been methodically sanded off.
And what's left?
What emerges on the other side is a completely harmless, ineffective nub of an idea that offends no one but accomplishes nothing. The bureaucracy protects its own existence by softening change. But in this context, we are not talking about a delayed marketing campaign. We are talking about global partnerships, military posturing, and national security. How does a diplomatic message physically get altered like that?
Imagine the president issues a stark, unambiguous directive. Tell country X to immediately cease doing Y, or there will be severe economic consequences.
Okay, pretty clear.
If that instruction goes through the traditional State Department clearance process, it first goes to a desk officer. The desk officer worries about straining the long-term relationship. They pass it to a deputy assistant secretary who worries about how country X's allies will react.
Right.
It goes to the legal department who soften the language regarding consequences. It goes to an interagency review board. By the time the message is actually delivered to country X, the threat has been diluted into a polite expression of concern. The permanent bureaucracy inherently resists stark directives because stark directives disrupt the established equilibrium.
But when the president utilizes a personal envoy, that entire sanding down process is bypassed. The channel is direct. The message is delivered with its sharp edges intact, exactly as the commander-in-chief intended.
It's exactly. The author states that multiplying these envoys is not merely a staffing expansion, it is the restoration of the president's capacity to act. The directive is clear. The president needs to name more envoys, make it unmistakable in writing that they answer only to him, and instruct the State Department that their sole operational duty regarding these envoys is to clear the way.
This leads us to the overarching philosophy of the entire piece, which the author captures beautifully with a quote from a U.S. ambassador. It's not your enemies you need to worry about, it's your friends.
That quote crystallizes the central theme of internal vulnerability versus external threats. The author argues that an immense, disproportionate amount of energy is being expended by senior officials inside the building solely to ground the president's own envoys.
They are utilizing the vast machinery of the government to target the very individuals sent to serve the country's interests. The author explicitly references a network of embedded actors and subversives who are actively, consciously trying to slow down, dilute, and ultimately outlast a political agenda they did not vote for and do not support. They specifically link this behavior to inside job investigations.
Right, which ties back to the broader context.
Exactly. If we look at the broader structure of the source material, this dispatch is Volume 1 of the Unedited History Project. The title of that specific volume is Inside Job, A Color Revolution Domesticated.
So the author is inextricably tying this hyper-specific instance of throttling envoys to a much broader systemic theory of internal governmental sabotage. They are challenging the reader to imagine an alternate reality.
What does that reality look like?
What if the immense energy, budget, and time currently being utilized by the State Department to fight the president's own Article 2 appointees was instead turned outward? What if the department hunted the embedded subversives who are steering the government against the country, rather than hunting the envoys trying to implement the agenda?
The author's conclusion is that the nation would be measurably, undeniably safer.
Right.
It is a profound, almost tragic irony. The resistance, the entrenched permanent bureaucracy, is actively using the immense machinery of the government to defend itself against the one specific tool, the personal envoy, that was explicitly designed by the Constitution to bypass that very machinery.
It is exactly like an autoimmune disease. The immune system of the bureaucracy is attacking the brain's own messengers. And the author's final warning is uncompromising. Until the Secretary of State or the President himself actively intervenes and puts a stop to it, the country will continue to pay the price in the geopolitical currency it can least afford right now.
Which is global reach, international credibility, and time.
Exactly.
Well, we have covered incredible ground today. We started by defining the immense modern threat surface and why agility is paramount. We explored the constitutional origins of the personal envoy, a direct extension of the president's Article 2 powers tracing all the way back to George Washington and Gouverneur Morris.
And we examined how those constitutional powers are allegedly being usurped by a deputy secretary who possesses absolutely no legal authority over them.
Right. We dissected the specific mechanics of that interference. The deeply public, humiliating excommunication of Tom Barrack that had to be reversed, the incessant micromanagement of Nick Adams, and the profoundly concerning hypothetical regarding Albania, where the quiet omission of an American presence might have cost us crucial influence during national crisis.
We mapped out the bureaucratic battlefield, too. We looked at how the deputy is allegedly utilizing calendar control to go over the secretary's head, how the departure of Michael Needham removed a critical institutional guardrail, and how the media, specifically the New York Times, has investigated this entire dynamic but chosen the power of silence.
And finally, we analyzed Christopher Landau's financial entanglements, raising the vital question of whose interests are truly being protected when the president's direct lines are severed.
It serves as a comprehensive, terrifying anatomy of how a single, strategically placed node within a massive bureaucracy can attempt to paralyze the executive will of the United States.
It really does. And it leaves me with one final thought, something for you, the listener, to mull over that builds on everything we've explored today. The author makes a highly compelling case that the president needs to radically expand the envoy program to fight back against this sabotage.
Right.
But if an envoy is grounded on a tarmac in a foreign embassy, stripped of their budget and support, and the president is simultaneously insulated by layers of scheduling bureaucracy, with deputies actively bumping crucial meetings off the calendar, does the commander-in-chief even know his people have been silenced?
That is the million-dollar question.
We constantly assume the person sitting at the very top of the organizational chart, the person sitting behind the resolute desk in the Oval Office, has access to all the information in the world. But this deep dive suggests something entirely different. It suggests that the ultimate power in a complex, modern system might not actually lie in the authority to make the final decision.
Right, it lies in access.
The ultimate power might lie in controlling the calendar, restricting the travel budget, and bottlenecking the flow of information of the people trying to bring you the options in the first place. If the guy in the mailroom unplugs the red phone and the scheduling department refuses to let anyone tell the CEO the phone is dead, who is actually running the company. Totally. The threat surface across the world right now is unusually broad.
Yeah, and in an environment like that, the agility of U.S. diplomacy isn't just a nice to have. It is literal national security.
Agility is literally the difference between preventing a crisis and just blindly reacting to one.
Exactly. Because when the geopolitical landscape shifts as fast as it does today, the executive branch needs instruments that can move at the speed of the crisis, not at the speed of bureaucracy.
Which brings us to the core mystery we are exploring today. Like, what happens when the president's most flexible diplomatic instrument, which are special envoys, is quietly disabled from inside his own State Department?
And crucially, not by the Secretary of State.
Right, but by a subcabinet official acting far, far outside their structural lane.
Yeah, so what we're really examining here is a phenomenon that acts as an unauthorized veto.
An unauthorized veto. I like that framing.
It's exactly what it is. It's a structural flaw within the executive branch. When a single official has the administrative capability to throttle the president's independent diplomatic channels, it broadcasts this profound signal of internal friction.
Other countries absolutely notice that.
Oh, international relations is a highly observant discipline. Adversaries are constantly mapping these vulnerabilities.
So if they see a vulnerability, they exploit it.
Precisely. If they identify that a direct presidential channel can just be choked off internally by, administrative maneuvering, they will factor that into their strategy.
They realize they don't necessarily have to negotiate with the United States.
Right. They can simply wait for the United States to entangle itself in its own red tape.
Okay, let's unpack this. Before we delve into the specific communications and the actual individuals involved, we really have to build a foundation.
Yeah, the legal architecture here is super important.
It is, because I think the public often uses titles like envoy and ambassador kind of interchangeably.
Oh, all the time.
Yeah.
People just picture this monolithic group of diplomats going to fancy foreign galas.
Exactly. But constitutional law draws a massive, incredibly strict firewall between different types of representatives.
It really does. Understanding the plain law behind special envoys is, it's absolutely paramount to understanding why this unauthorized veto is such a big deal.
So break that down for us. How does the law separate them?
So the legal architecture separates envoys into two highly distinct buckets. The first category is the statutory envoy.
Meaning created by statute, by law.
Right. This is a position explicitly created by Congress through legislation. So Congress will identify a specific issue like, say, international religious freedom or hostage affairs or combating anti-Semitism.
And they pass a law saying we need an envoy for this.
Exactly. They pass a law establishing an envoy to manage that specific portfolio.
And because Congress wrote the law creating the position, I'm assuming they naturally retain a mechanism to influence who actually gets that job.
They absolutely do. Primarily through the confirmation process. There was a significant provision cemented in the fiscal year 2022 National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA.
Ah, the NDAA. Always full of interesting structural rules.
Yeah, and this one stipulated that these statutory positions generally require Senate confirmation.
So it's a big public deal.
It is. Many are elevated to the rank of ambassador at large. There's a very formal, very public vetting process. Now, the executive branch can sometimes bypass this if they certify the position doesn't exercise significant authority, but the baseline expectation for a statutory envoy is that the Senate gets a vote.
Okay, so that's the first bucket, the statutory envoy. But the documents and the situations we are diving into today revolve entirely around the second bucket.
Yeah, the second category is where the friction happens.
And the legal architecture here is just fascinating. We need to talk about the president's personal envoy.
Right from the start, this role bypasses Congress completely.
Completely. It is rooted directly in Article 2 of the Constitution, which vests executive power in the president.
And we should clarify, this isn't some modern loophole someone discovered recently.
No, not at all. This is a foundational practice. Literally, one of George Washington's very first foreign policy maneuvers as president was dispatching a man named Gouverneur Morris to London in 1789.
Wow, 1789. That's as foundational as it gets.
Right. Washington needed someone to test the waters with the British regarding a potential commercial treaty, and he sent Morris entirely without Senate involvement.
Washington's use of Gouverneur Morris really set a precedent that has been maintained for centuries.
It's just understood that the president can do this.
By statute, yes. The president has the authority to confer the personal rank of ambassador or minister on an individual for a special mission of a temporary nature.
And what's the mechanism for that? Does he just tell them they have the job?
Basically. The mechanism is straightforward. The president just notifies Congress of the appointment. There's no request for permission, and there's certainly no confirmation hearing.
But there is a catch, right? A legal line they can't cross.
A very strict legal boundary, yeah. It's been drawn meticulously over the years by the Supreme Court and articulated in various memos by the Department of Justice's Office of Legal Counsel.
And that boundary is about authority.
Exactly. A personal envoy carries the president's voice, but they absolutely do not hold independent legal authority.
Meaning they can't just walk into a foreign capital and unilaterally sign a binding treaty?
No, they cannot. Nor can they appropriate federal funds or dictate legally binding agency regulations.
So they don't actually have the power to make laws or spend money.
Right. They cannot exercise what the law terms, quote, significant authority pursuant to the laws of the United States.
Because if they did, that would change everything.
That distinction is the linchpin of the entire arrangement. If an envoy possessed binding legal power, they would cross the constitutional threshold into being an officer of the United States.
Which triggers the Appointments Clause.
Exactly. It instantly triggers the Appointments Clause of the Constitution, which mandates Senate confirmation.
So by strictly restricting them from wielding independent legal authority, they remain personal envoys.
Yes. They exist purely as an extension of the president's intent. They are, quite literally, the president's voice in a room.
And because their entire legal existence is tied to carrying the president's voice, they serve entirely at the president's pleasure.
100%. The president hires them. The president dictates the length of their term.
The president can expand their mandate.
And only the president decides when their term ends.
Which brings us to a massive structural realization for this deep dive. Because a personal envoy reports directly to the Oval Office, the standard organizational chart of the State Department just does not apply to them.
It's completely irrelevant to their role.
So, a Deputy Secretary of State does not manage, oversee, or discipline a personal presidential envoy.
The supervisory line just does not exist. It's not there. These personal envoys often operate on time-limited appointments. They're given a defined window to accomplish a highly specific mission.
And when that window closes?
When it closes, it is merely a scheduled expiration of a term. It is not a termination for cause, and it is certainly not an event that grants lower-level officials the authority to intervene.
So this is like a CEO sending a personal, highly trusted fixer to negotiate a critical acquisition in Tokyo, right?
Well, that's a great way to look at it.
The fixer answers only to the CEO, but while this person is packing for the airport, a middle management VP from the Human Resources Department logs into the corporate portal and cancels the fixer's flight.
What's fascinating here is that your analogy captures the mechanical failure perfectly.
It's absurd, right? The HR person has no authority over the CEO's personal fixer.
Exactly. Because a term ending is simply a scheduled expiration. So if any official, someone wholly outside the envoy's direct chain of command, begins restricting their travel or blocking their logistical support or treating a scheduled term expiration as an opportunity to shut down their operations,
they are crossing a huge line.
They are not exercising legitimate oversight. They are exercising an unauthorized veto. They are asserting authority over a presidential instrument that the Constitution explicitly places out of their reach.
Okay, so if the plain law dictates that a Deputy Secretary of State has absolutely zero operational authority over a personal presidential envoy, what does it look like when they just seize that authority anyway?
It looks incredibly dysfunctional, and thankfully we have the paper trail to show exactly how it happens.
Yeah, the source material for this deep dive includes a documented paper trail mapping this exact friction.
Which is rare to see so clearly laid out.
It really is. We're focusing on the documented conduct of Deputy Secretary of State Christopher Landau. According to the internal communications reviewed in our sources, there was a specific presidentially appointed special envoy whose portfolio is designated as global partnerships.
And just by the very nature of that title, building global partnerships requires a high volume of international travel.
You can't do it from a desk in Washington.
No, it requires face-to-face engagement with foreign leadership. Diplomacy at that level relies heavily on physical presence.
You have to be in the room.
You do. Trust is not established over secure video conferences. It requires reading the dynamics and demonstrating the commitment of the United States through the actual physical deployment of a presidential representative.
Yet this specific envoy found their operational mobility severely restricted. The travel authorization process was basically becoming a blockade.
It was a bureaucratic quicksand.
So the envoy eventually pressed the deputy secretary directly regarding these constant logistical hurdles. And in response, Deputy Secretary Landau confirmed in writing that he had personally instructed U.S. embassies to cancel meetings involving this presidential envoy.
In writing. That is wild. And the mechanism of how this is executed is really worth detailing because it illuminates the vulnerability of the whole system.
Right, because an envoy can't just buy a commercial airline ticket on Expedia and show up at a foreign embassy.
Oh, absolutely not. The State Department utilizes a system called ECC, which stands for Electronic Country Clearance.
How does that work?
Before any U.S. government official travels to a foreign country on official business, the chief of mission, which is usually the ambassador in that country, must grant clearance.
Because they are the ones responsible for everyone in their country.
Exactly. This process secures necessary resources, like diplomatic security details provided by the regional security officer.
So guys with earpieces and armored cars.
Right. It also secures access to secure communications and physical entry into the embassy compounds.
It's the logistical lifeblood of a diplomatic trip.
So if a Deputy Secretary of State instructs an embassy to deny country clearance or instructs them not to support the meetings, The envoy is physically grounded.
They literally can't go.
The funds for official travel cannot be dispersed, and the security protocols cannot be activated.
So the deputy secretary doesn't even need to formally fire the envoy.
No, they don't. They simply turn off the logistical machinery required for the envoy to function.
And to compound that, the sources indicate that the deputy secretary did not keep this correspondence private.
No, he did not.
The emails confirming the cancellation of these meetings were copied widely across the State Department.
Right. He used the see the building tactic.
Which is so aggressive.
It's a highly intentional administrative maneuver. By copying a wide distribution list of diplomats, desk officers, and career staff, the deputy secretary manufactures immediate institutional embarrassment for the envoy.
It's basically a public shaming within the department.
Exactly. It strips away their perceived authority. When the entire department watches the president's hand-picked representative get publicly grounded by a subcabinet official, it signals to the career staff that this envoy lacks the internal backing of the building.
It isolates them completely.
It isolates the envoy and degrades their credibility before they even attempt to speak with a foreign counterpart.
And the impact of that extends far beyond just internal embarrassment. The source material outlines a staggering specific detail regarding this envoy for global partnerships.
This part is really crucial.
A foreign head of government had extended a standing invitation for an official visit.
Which is the pinnacle of what this role was designed to achieve.
Exactly. A direct line to a head of state. Yet, the State Department withheld the travel authorization. The logistical support was denied, and the visit to this foreign leader never happened.
It was just canceled.
Oh, wait, let me push back here for a second. Could this just be a zealous manager trying to keep the department organized? Like, the State Department is a massive bureaucracy managing thousands of people.
Sure, it's huge.
Travel budgets are finite. Security resources are stretched. Doesn't someone at the deputy secretary level need to manage the ledger and ensure people aren't just flying around the globe unchecked?
That's a fair question. Maintaining fiscal and logistical discipline is absolutely a core function of the State Department's leadership. Someone has to approve the budgets and manage the resources.
Right.
However, when evaluating the documented communications provided in the source material, the context suggests this goes far beyond standard budgetary oversight.
Because of that structural boundary we were talking about.
Exactly. The deputy secretary does not manage the presidential envoy. If the issue were purely budgetary, there are standard protocols to address resource constraints with the White House, since the envoy is a presidential asset.
You pick up the phone and call the White House. You don't just cancel the trip.
Right. But utilizing the administrative machinery, like denying country clearance to outright cancel meetings with foreign heads of state, that effectively neutralizes the president's diplomatic strategy.
It's a blockade.
Applying administrative friction to the point of total paralysis is indistinguishable from a deliberate effort to stop these envoys from functioning entirely.
And, a canceled meeting might sound like a minor scheduling hiccup to an outsider, but in the realm of international diplomacy, absence creates a void.
It absolutely does.
When the United States fails to show up, that void is rapidly filled by other actors or by escalating instability. What happens when that void occurs right before a massive geopolitical crisis?
That is the multi-million-dollar question.
Let's look at the tangible cost of this bureaucratic friction. I'm going to pose a highly specific, provocative scenario, and I want to be crystal clear to you listening. We're discussing this strictly as a counterfactual question based on the timeline and the sources.
This is a what-if scenario.
Strictly a what-if. What if that foreign leader whose standing invitation was blocked was the Prime Minister of Albania?
Oh.
What if this specific envoy, tasked with global partnerships, was arranging to be received in Tirana in the exact weeks directly preceding the massive protests currently unfolding in Albania?
Now, we must apply extreme analytical discipline to this scenario. Geopolitics is an incredibly complex web of historical grievances, domestic politics, and economic pressures. We cannot, under any circumstances, say that a grounded meeting caused the civil unrest in Albania.
No, we're definitely not claiming a proven butterfly effect here.
Right. Drawing a direct causal line from a single canceled diplomatic visit to mass protests is analytically unsound. No one can prove that.
But the unknowability is the point, isn't it?
Yes. The true cost of the unauthorized veto is the generation of unknowability. If those talks had materialized, if the president's personal envoy had been sitting in the room articulating the president's priorities and offering partnership to the Albanian leadership during those critical, fragile weeks, could the trajectory have been altered?
Could institutional alliances have been reinforced in a way that stabilized the environment?
Exactly. Could back-channel tensions have been navigated more effectively? We just don't know.
And this is why I want to emphasize to you, the listener, why you should care about this obscure dispute over travel authorizations. This isn't about proving that one diplomat could have single-handedly halted a crisis.
No.
It's about realizing that when an internal actor grounds a presidential envoy, the United States is actively choosing to fly blind.
We remove our own capabilities.
The fact that we will never know if those protests could have been mitigated, the reality that the president was denied his chosen instrument in a critical region, is the literal geopolitical price paid for grounding the envoy.
It represents a massive opportunity cost paid in the currency of global stability and American influence. And, if this grounding were an isolated incident, it might be chalked up to friction or a severe miscommunication.
Just two guys who don't get along.
Right. But in structural analysis, an isolated incident is merely a single data point. When an established pattern emerges across multiple distinct portfolios, it reveals a systemic protocol.
How do we know this isn't a one-off? Well, the sources indicate this behavior extends well beyond a single envoy.
Let's talk about Nick Adams.
Yeah, let's bring up Nick Adams, another high-profile presidential envoy, and his work frequently garners press notice.
He's very visible.
Very. And according to the reviewed communications, Nick Adams received the exact same treatment.
The exact same mechanism of restriction.
He faced a relentless stream of restricting, micromanaging emails emanating from the Deputy Secretary's office.
So we now have two separate envoys, managing entirely different portfolios, encountering the exact same administrative blockade.
Two is a pattern.
It absolutely is. That elevates the situation from an anomaly to an established pattern of behavior regarding how the Deputy Secretary interacts with Article 2 appointments.
And this pattern really culminates in the episode involving Tom Barrack.
Oh, the Barrack situation is fascinating.
To analyze this accurately, we really need to divide this sequence into two distinct parts, so we don't confuse routine procedure with the deputy's extraordinary actions.
Right. Let's look at Part A first.
Part A is the routine procedure. Tom Barrack held a formal term as a special envoy. As we discussed earlier, these are temporary, time-limited appointments.
They all have expiration dates.
His term reached its natural expiration date. That is the standard life cycle of the role. Following that expiration, the president evaluated the geopolitical needs and simply expanded Barrack's mandate, officially tasking him with a broader portfolio covering both Syria and Iraq.
So Part A is an example of the constitutional architecture functioning flawlessly. A temporary term concludes, the executive assesses the landscape, and the president simply issues a new mandate.
There's zero structural conflict in that sequence.
None at all. That is normal.
But then we have Part B, and Part B is where the structural conflict detonates.
The subversion part.
Exactly. Based on details attributed to members of the State Department's own social media and communication schemes, the handling of Barrack's expiration behind the scenes was anything but routine.
What did they do?
When his initial term ended, Deputy Secretary Landau directed the Secretary of State's official social media apparatus to publicly announce Barrack's exit.
Okay, if we connect this to the bigger picture,
right,
utilizing the official communication channels of the Secretary of State to broadcast the expiration of a time-limited presidential envoy is an extraordinary maneuver.
It's not just an FYI to the public.
Not at all. In the nuanced world of diplomatic signaling, an official public post like that functions as professional excommunication.
Wow, professional excommunication.
It sends a definitive signal to foreign governments, the international press, and the field that this person is finished, that they no longer speak for the United States. It's a deliberate attempt to permanently close the door on the envoy's authority.
The incredible part is how fast it backfired.
Oh, it was immediate.
The timeline is almost comical. The State Department utilizes its massive platform to publicly declare the president's envoy is finished. And within a single day, the president formally reappointed Tom Barrack, handing him an even larger, expanded mandate for Syria and Iraq.
Talk about a reversal.
This presidential action literally forced the State Department to publicly walk back their own definitive announcement from the previous day.
It places the internal friction on public display. The intent of the administrative bureaucracy collided directly with the intent of the commander-in-chief, and the commander-in-chief overrode them.
But attempting to publicly humiliate the president's envoy forcing a highly visible showdown over their status is a boldly aggressive posture for a deputy.
It really is.
It begs the question, just how far up the chain of command is this subcabinet official willing to reach to enforce his veto?
Well, the intelligence attributed to those familiar with the department's scheduling reveals that the conduct is directed upward as well as downward.
Meaning he's looking past his own boss.
Exactly. The deputy secretary has repeatedly sought to bypass the Secretary of State entirely, attempting to secure direct meetings with the president, specifically to discuss the special envoys.
Wait, a deputy secretary is the principal deputy to the Secretary of State. Their whole job is to assist their boss.
Yeah.
Seeking out the president directly, going entirely over the secretary's head to discuss appointees who don't even report to the State Department. That is a massive violation of the chain of command.
It's structural audacity.
What exactly does he intend to say to the president?
We don't know.
We don't. Is he going to ask the president to stop using his own constitutional powers? The fact that these meeting requests keep getting taken off the agenda, yet he keeps trying, shows how far outside his lane he feels entitled to operate.
And we have to look at the contextual timeline here, because agency behavior is heavily influenced by the presence or absence of institutional guardrails.
Who is keeping this in check?
Well, we need to bring in Michael Needham.
Yes.
Needham was the Secretary's Chief of Staff for 6 years and Counselor of the State Department. A Chief of Staff in an agency of that size is the ultimate enforcer of the Secretary's will.
He's the guy who keeps the building in line.
Right. He was a massive check on administrative overreach. But Needham just departed the State Department a few days ago, on May 26, 2026.
Right. And just as a reminder for our listeners, today is June 8th, 2026.
So this is highly fluid. Needham's exit to become Deputy National Security Advisor removes a massive institutional guardrail.
It creates a vacuum.
A vacuum that a proactive official could further exploit.
Which makes me wonder, does the Secretary of State even know the full extent of what his deputy is doing? Like, is he fully briefed on the degradation of these presidential channels?
The internal visibility is an open question, but what is documented is that this friction is no longer a secret. Diplomatic circles are highly attuned to this.
People are talking.
They are. Specifically, there are active, ongoing conversations in Paris where diplomats and foreign officials are openly expressing concern that U.S. envoys are being quietly sidelined.
So the people on the other side of the table can see it happening.
Yes, and the domestic press is picking up on it too. The New York Times is actively asking questions about this restricted travel and the dynamic between the deputy and the envoys.
Though, to be clear, strictly following our sources here, we are not saying a story was killed or suppressed.
No, not at all. The reporting is simply underway. The questions are being asked, but the piece has just not yet appeared.
But the dysfunction is breaching the surface. And whenever you observe administrative behavior that defies structural logic so blatantly, you have to look at the background of the person executing it.
You have to look at their context.
Exactly. Which brings us to the conflict of interest layer.
This is a very sensitive area.
It is, and here's where it gets really interesting. But I am setting a very strict guardrail for this segment.
Good idea.
Everything we are about to discuss regarding Christopher Landau comes directly from his legally mandated public filings. Specifically, his Office of Government Ethics Form 278E financial disclosures.
Public records.
Only public records. We are not alleging any criminal behavior whatsoever. We are not making any assertions regarding ties to cartels or organized crime.
Right.
We are simply analyzing his public financial footprint and raising fair conflict of interest questions that naturally emerge when an official wields this level of influence.
And, analyzing his background requires acknowledging his extensive qualifications.
Yeah.
Christopher Landau is not a novice.
No, he's incredibly accomplished.
He possesses an elite pedigree.
Yep.
Harvard College, Harvard Law, clerkships at the Supreme Court. He built a highly lucrative career in appellate law, and he possesses direct diplomatic experience.
He served as the U.S. ambassador to Mexico from 2019 to 2021.
Right, so he understands the machinery of government, the law, and international relations at a very granular level.
Which makes the anomalies in his public filings particularly striking. Let's list the specific financial entanglements on his OGE disclosures that warrant scrutiny, given his current role-setting U.S. policy.
Okay, let's go through them.
First, the filings show a $15,000 honorarium received from Canacero.
Canacero is the National Steel Industry Trade Association of Mexico. It's a very powerful lobbying and economic entity within the country.
And that $15,000 honorarium was paid to him less than a year before he was nominated to serve as Deputy Secretary of State. Second, he maintains a continuing advisory board seat on the Wilson Center's Mexico Institute,
which is a notable think tank.
Third, he reported a retained financial interest in a contingency case being handled by the law firm Ellis George LLP. And the stated value of this interest is massive.
How massive?
Listed between $5 million and $25 million.
Wow. And, in public OGE filings, the specific client for a contingency case of that magnitude is often shielded, so the client remains unnamed in this disclosure.
Right, unnamed client. Fourth, the disclosures reveal he held significant equity in FEMSA.
FEMSA is an absolute titan in the Mexican economy.
A massive conglomerate, right.
Huge. They are a massive beverage and retail conglomerate, the largest independent Coca-Cola bottling group in the world, and they own the OXXO convenience store chain, which is everywhere across Latin America.
He did divest from these FEMSA holdings, utilizing a 278T filing, which is a periodic transaction report in May 2025.
Okay, so he divested.
He did. But the most glaring issue in the public record concerns a missing document. His ethics agreement compliance certification is totally absent from the Office of Government Ethics Public Index.
That's a big deal.
And based on standard timelines, it is roughly a year past its expected due date.
This raises an important question because we need to explain why that missing certification is structurally significant.
Please do.
The OGE process exists to prevent conflicts of interest. When an official enters government with extensive private financial ties, they sign an ethics agreement outlining exactly how they will divest, recuse themselves, or mitigate those conflicts.
Like a promise to clean up their portfolio.
Exactly. And the compliance certification is the formal legal documentation proving they actually followed through on that agreement.
It's a receipt.
It's the receipt. Now, missing that certification isn't necessarily illegal on its face, and none of the individual financial line items, the honorariums, the equity, the board seats are illegal either. High-level government officials frequently transition from lucrative private sector careers.
Sure, that's normal.
However, the policy environment dictates the level of scrutiny required. You have an official heavily woven into the financial fabric of a specific nation, Mexico.
A country he now helps set macro-level U.S. policy toward.
Right. And the context of 2026 is critical here. The United States is deeply engaged in highly sensitive negotiations regarding the USMCA trade agreement. We're navigating severe economic friction over steel tariffs and debating incredibly volatile policies regarding cartel designations.
Adding to that complex dynamic, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum and the ruling Marina government have maintained a notably warm public posture toward him.
When an official's financial history and regional relationships are that deeply intertwined with a foreign power, it invites intense scrutiny.
It absolutely does.
And when that same official begins executing unusual administrative maneuvers like unilaterally disabling the president's personal diplomatic channels, the absence of that ethics compliance certification transforms from a simple bureaucratic oversight into a glaring structural vulnerability.
I have to ask pointedly, whose interests are being served when the president's envoys are grounded?
That is the core question.
I immediately want to clarify that we cannot answer that. The motive remains obscured. But when a subcabinet official begins acting as a bottleneck for the president's diplomacy, the silence surrounding that missing ethics certification becomes incredibly loud.
The vulnerability exists regardless of the motive. Whether this behavior is driven by pure bureaucratic territorialism, like just a desire to consolidate all diplomatic power within the traditional State Department structure, or by external policy preferences, the true danger is the capability.
The fact that he can do it.
Yes. The administrative architecture currently allows a single official to throw sand into the gears of Article 2 constitutional powers, and the gears just grind to a halt.
So if the system is this vulnerable to one subcabinet official, how does the president fix it? How do you bypass a bureaucracy that has decided it wants to control the steering wheel?
The remedy detailed in the source analysis runs counter to typical bureaucratic instincts. The solution is not to initiate endless internal reviews or establish new interagency committees.
No more red tape.
Right. The president should aggressively expand his envoy corps, not ration it.
Increase the footprint of personal representatives.
Precisely. The strategic goal should be to cultivate a small, highly disciplined, ready reserve of special envoys, a trusted cadre of representatives that the president can activate simultaneously, deploying them across multiple global theaters to execute different lines of effort.
And the inherent value of these personal envoys is their singular focus. They carry only one agenda, the elected president's agenda.
Unfiltered.
Totally unfiltered. They are completely free from the career equities, the internal departmental politics, and that persistent bureaucratic instinct to soften instructions that really plagues permanent State Department staff.
Oh, the softening of instructions is a huge issue. When the president directs a policy, say, delivered this specific, firm message to this foreign leader, the permanent administrative staff often processes that through a filter of institutional caution.
They want to be polite.
Right. They might translate it into a nuanced version of the message to avoid ruffling feathers or disrupting their own long-term career relationships. An envoy just walks into the room and delivers the message exactly as the president intended.
More envoys equal restored presidential capacity.
Mathematically, yes.
Yeah.
You systematically outpace the bureaucracy's administrative bandwidth to apply the unauthorized veto. If they ground one, 3 others are advancing the agenda.
But, analyzing the deputy secretary's actions through this lens of bandwidth reveals a profound misalignment of priorities.
How so?
Well, if a senior official like the deputy secretary possesses the time, energy, and administrative capacity to aggressively police the travel logistics of people inside the executive branch, shouldn't that energy be directed at actual institutional friction?
Oh, absolutely.
The permanent bureaucracy often harbors elements that actively resist the elected agenda. Why is a deputy secretary targeting the president's own loyal Article 2 appointees rather than rooting out the genuine administrative resistance?
That sharp redirect highlights the core reality of the situation. If an official is expending this much capital to blockade presidential instruments, the friction is not about efficiency, it's about control.
Christopher Landau is not the Secretary of State, but he is behaving as though he were.
He is assuming authority the Constitution denies him.
Until the actual Secretary of State or the President of the United States forcefully course-corrects this behavior and strips away this unauthorized veto, the country continues to pay a massive price.
A price paid in reach, credibility, and time.
Exactly. The currency we can least afford right now.
When the internal mechanics degrade our own capabilities, we do the adversary's work for them.
I want to address you, the listener, directly for a second and pull together the threads of what we've talked about today. We begin with the metaphor of the steering wheel disconnecting from the tires.
The hidden gear.
Right. Here's a final thought to mull over. If a single subcabinet official can quietly engineer an unauthorized veto over the president's most agile diplomatic tools through sheer bureaucratic friction, utilizing ECC denials, CCing the building, leveraging administrative travel protocols, we have to ask, what else is happening?
It's a terrifying prospect.
What other vital presidential directives across the vast, sprawling expanse of the wider government apparatus are currently being bled to death by 1,000 unreturned emails, delayed compliance certifications, and a barrage of canceled meetings?
It really forces you to question the illusion of executive control.
When the president gives an order, who actually decides if the car turns left?
That is the crucial question of modern governance.
Look at the VETOS Narta wetland in Albania. It is one of the most untouched coastal ecosystems left in the Mediterranean. But in May 2026, this quiet, biodiverse landscape was violently sliced open by the sudden installation of harsh barbed wire. Locals and environmentalists quickly clashed with private security. They were fighting to stop a massive luxury resort project moving in on protected public land, a development famously championed by American investor Jared Kushner. Within days, a specific local dispute over public beach access and property rights vanished. 2 competing, massive geopolitical narratives swallowed the story whole. First, a vocal faction of protesters pointed to Kushner's background and declared the resort was actually a secret Israeli plot to colonize the Albanian coast. On the other side, Albanian Prime Minister Edi Rama pushed back. He went on international television and claimed the protests were a hybrid war orchestrated by Iran and non-governmental organizations backed by George Soros, Israeli plots on one side and Iranian bots on the other. But land registries do not care about geopolitical shouting matches. To figure out who is actually taking the beach, we have to audit the receipts. This map of the Albanian coast shows the topography of the megaproject. To understand the deal, we have to divide the project into 2 totally separate legal zones, the offshore Sazan Island and the Zvernex mainland. Look at Sazan Island first. This is a former uninhabited military base. The state owns it, and the Albanian government legally granted Kushner's firm the development rights under a strategic investor designation. But down here on the Zvernex mainland, where the violent protests actually broke out, the land was private, And the buyer assembling those coastal plots is not Kushner. It is an offshore Dutch trust acting through a corporate shell called Albania Land Development. If we pull the incorporation records, we find out who actually owns Albania Land Development. The ultimate beneficiaries are Ramez and Mohammed Al-Kayat, two billionaire brothers from Qatar. These specific Qatari-owned plots are now at the center of an active criminal probe. Albania's anti-corruption structure, SPAC, froze the company's accounts to investigate allegations of fraudulent property titles and violent mafia-linked land grabs. The violent dispute on the mainland has nothing to do with Israeli colonization. It is a Qatari-funded land consolidation, hiding conveniently behind an American celebrity brand. Now let's audit the people on the other side of the fence. The Prime Minister insists the citizens and 41 environmental groups fighting this project are funded by Iran and George Soros. This flowchart shows the organizational network behind the protests. If we take the 41 groups coordinating the Flamingo Revolution and trace the money upstream, we can see exactly who is paying them. The lines do not lead to Tehran. They lead to European birdwatching societies, the outdoor apparel company Patagonia, and the Prince Albert II of Monaco Foundation. We find standard nature conservation grants with absolutely zero financial connections to Iran or Soros's Open Society foundations. And the claim that this is an anti-Israel operation completely falls apart when you look at the signatory list. One of the core environmental groups officially opposing the resort is Delphis, an Israeli marine mammal charity. The Flamingo Revolution is an organic coalition of local residents and international nature conservationists. The Prime Minister's claim of a foreign hybrid war is a complete fabrication. That leaves us with an uncomfortable question. If these protesters have zero financial ties to George Soros, why did the Prime Minister specifically point the finger at him? In politics, there is a strategy called projection. You accuse your opponents of the exact thing you are doing, muddying the waters so the public gets confused and stops paying attention to the facts. The Prime Minister knows exactly how the Soros network operates. Edi Rama is arguably the most heavily Soros-aligned political figure in the entire Balkan region. This timeline charts the financial history of the Open Society foundations in Albania. Between 1992 and 2020, OSF poured $131 million straight into Albanian state institutions and judicial projects. OSF was the primary funder behind Rama's sweeping 2016 justice reform. The ties are so deep that George Soros' son, Alex, publicly refers to Rama as his brother. When a leader gets caught handing protected coastal land to offshore billionaires while locals are dragged off the beach, the truth is a liability. The best survival tactic is to point at the shadows, shout about phantom wars, and hope no one reads the receipts.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is Friday. Thank you so much for joining us, the 14th day of December 2012. And there is a reported school shooting in Connecticut, one of the states that has draconian restrictions on gun ownership. Reportedly, right now, it looks like only the gunman is dead. But the media will hype the living daylights out of this, so anytime somebody goes crazy, the first thing pops in their head is go to a victim disarmament zone, a free fire zone where it's guaranteed no one is armed to protect themselves. If you went and randomly went in people's houses in Texas, more than 70% of people statistically own guns in the state, about 60% nationwide. And, if you just randomly went and kicked indoors and tried to, shoot people, you'd get shot in most homes. But government training camps, you can bet nobody is going to be armed there unless there happens to be a police officer out in the parking lot. So we'll be looking at that. Also, obviously, the big news, and Kurt Nimmo has a story from our source, Jim Tucker, up at Infowars.com. Trilateralists discuss big war in the Middle East as Obama sends soldiers to Turkey. And here is the CNN report. U.S. to send troops, Patriot missiles to Turkey. The troops are already there. The Patriot missiles were already there. They've been there for 22 months, helping get al-Qaeda trained and armed and how to use shoulder-launched surface-to-air missiles, and that's all on record. And the ambassador there in Benghazi and the al-Qaeda command post worldwide is not Afghanistan. It is Benghazi in eastern Libya. He was there, of course, reportedly helping to transfer the missiles to Turkey. And then he magically got killed when the local security chief, which is al-Qaeda, came by and killed him. And for 8 hours, Obama ordered the stand down. Gee, what do you think's going on there? They're getting rid of the evidence of what they've done, because when they roll into phase 2, after they bring down Syria, they're going to launch terror attacks in Europe and the United States. And then you know what's going to happen.